nothing you did that made him the way he is. You don't seem to have it in you to raise and inspire a child like Timothy. He is truly gifted, and perhaps it was for the best that he wandered away and into my sights. Now I'm certain he'll have the chance to reach his fullest potential. Allow me to explain how Timothy and I met. As you know, it was Halloween night. Ah yes, my favorite night of the year. The night when everyone goes around masquerading as something other than themselves. So many people roaming the streets covered in blood. I don't stand out on Halloween. I don't have to hide. It's the freest I get to be all year. I had just killed some filthy whore by a dumpster in an alleyway. Hookers get murdered all the time, often by me, and no one seems to care, even when the news feels like reporting on it. That's what makes it so easy. If there's no one to miss them, there's no one to demand justice. This one, though, she was special. She had such a pretty mouth, with big, sweet lips, eyes like a damn beanie baby, and the softest, smoothest pair of tits you could ever want. I could tell she was new, young, not yet ruined by the street. Those are my favorite ones. I fucked her in the alleyway, something I don't always do. And then I muffled her screams with one hand while slicing through her flesh with the knife I held in the other. It's my favorite feeling in the world when they stop fighting, and ever so gradually wind down from high anxiety to a complete stop. Sometimes I swear I can feel their heartbeats weaken and fade out and peter out completely. God damn, do I love it so. Once I'd finished her off, I picked her up. Remember, I don't need to worry about the blood on this particular evening, and chucked her headfirst into the dumpster. She landed on the inside with a louder thud than I expected. But what I expected even less was the gasp I heard in response. Someone was hiding behind the dumpster. I'm not too proud to admit that I was scared. I mean, who wants to be caught? I sure as hell don't. You understand, don't you? I had my knife ready, just in case I needed to use it again, and slowly crept around to see who this witness was. And there he was, this little boy in a clown costume. He's told me since then that he's 10, but damn if I didn't think he was a toddler or something. A bit short for his age, isn't he? That's okay though. Special comes in all shapes and sizes. Well, I regret it now, but of course I barked at him. I demanded to know what he was doing hiding behind that dumpster. What he said damn near floored me. Do you know what he said? He said he'd been out specifically looking for me. How about that? Naturally, I asked him what the hell he was talking about. And he explained that you and his daddy make him watch the news every night because, in his words, you want him to be smart. Well, let me tell you, you sure did get your wish on that one. He said he'd seen a couple of news stories about the guy who keeps killing people. And so he wanted to come and find me. He picked Halloween to do it because it was the first time you were letting him go out alone. He knew I mostly went for horrors, and even picked up on the kinds of settings where I like to do the deed. Which is how he knew to wait for me behind a dumpster in the shitty part of town. See? Smart kid. Of course, I asked him what he wanted to find me for. Now this, what you're about to read, is extraordinary. Honestly, it chokes me up. I thought I was beyond these kinds of feelings, but your boy, your remarkable little boy, do you know what he said? He said I inspired him. He said my work excited him. He told me that his dream was to be just like me. How could I just say no to that? Sure, I'll admit that I was totally prepared to kill him. But I knew when I heard those words and saw the sincerity in those little eyes of his that this was something I couldn't just throw away. And so I've taken little Timmy under my bloody wing. Although, of course, he'd hate that I just called him that. You know how he is. He has exceeded every one of my expectations and passed every test I've thrown at him with flying colors. It's amazing how quickly he earned his first kill. I'll never forget the look on his face as he sliced into that woman's chest. It was the face of pure, unadulterated joy. I've never been so proud. And that's not all. He's getting better by the day. In fact, he's started going out by himself now. That's where he is tonight. I decided to take the night off to write you this little letter. I can hardly wait for him to get back and tell me all about who he managed to find and what he decided to do to them. He's astonishingly creative. So, Mrs. Chalmers, please don't fret. Timothy, as you can see, is completely safe from anyone or anything that might try to harm him. But whether or not they are safe with Timothy, well, that's the question now, isn't it? Sincerely, the guy who keeps killing people. Have you ever walked into a room and noticed the closet door hanging ever so slightly open when you know no one has been in there? You normally assume you did it but forgot to close it. Or you think maybe someone else did it. You open your closet sometimes and look around. Nothing. You won't ever see anything. Unless you wait until the sun goes down. It comes out when you sleep, ever so slowly pushing your closet door open. It crawls out, low to the ground on all fours to your bed and sits next to you. It puts its face up to yours and stares. Sometimes its stares stir your sleep, and you roll around in bed uncomfortably, rustling your covers. It likes to make noise in your closet and play with the doors and lights in your bedroom. Its black bony hands grab your covers and pull them off so you shiver. It puts its mouth right up to you and breathes its cold, shallow breath on your neck, giving you goosebumps. The stench of its breath smells like decaying flesh. It will continue to toy with you. It loves to play with its food. If it manages to wake you up and you open your eyes, it will be there with its jaws gaping open. It doesn't like it when you see it. Elena made sure that her husband was already boarded on the bus before she locked the apartment door. She headed straight to the red sofa, sat, and waited for the cordless phone beside the sofa to ring. When the phone finally rang, she picked up the phone and tried to calm herself. "Hello," a statement, not an inquiry. "Hello," Elena said. She heard a sound that seemed like a smirk. She tried to picture him do it, but she couldn't. She never saw this stranger's face, nor had he ever bothered to send her a picture of him. Not that it was an issue for her. "You pick up the phone pretty quick," the stranger said. "And you always have perfect timing," Elena replied. She pondered how on earth this guy manages to time his call this well. The stranger gave a long sigh. "What should I do? I'm bored and lonely. You're bored and lonely. We need each other." Elena chose not to respond to this statement. They both knew he's right. She made love to her husband in every corner of their apartment like rabid dogs while stifling moans, making sure their neighbors wouldn't hear. However, these blissful activities only lasted for a few weeks. 5 months ago, her husband, a lawyer, was entrusted with a high-profile criminal case that left him going home only to sleep. For 5 months, her lustful needs went unfulfilled until the cordless phone, which went with the apartment when they rented it, started to ring. On that same day, the stranger made Elena touch herself on the sofa. She became addicted to this cordless phone affair. Every day, right after her lawyer husband boarded the bus, the phone would ring, and she would pick it up. The stranger would then proceed to seduce her with his indecent words and his stimulating voice, leaving Elena gasping and tired at the end of every call. Yesterday, Elena bought a toy, discreetly, from an online shop and decided that its first use would be with a stranger, which she confided to him. The stranger responded with a laugh and asked her what she's wearing. Elena playfully revealed she's not wearing anything. This made the stranger draw a deep breath, a sign that he was getting aroused, which made Elena feel damp and warm between her legs. Elena was about to use the toy when she heard a faint knock on the door. It made her jump, and Elena quickly grabbed the bathrobe on the floor. In her haste, she forgot that the phone rested on her shoulders. When she stood up, the phone disassembled as soon as it hit the floor. She decided to answer the intruder first, believing that he would call again right after she fixed it. The pesky intruder introduced herself. "Hello, I'm your new neighbor across the hall, Cindy." "Hello, Cindy," in an irritated tone that Elena hoped her new neighbor picked up. "I'm really sorry for bothering you." Elena's gauge was right. "But the electricity's been gone for more than an hour now. I need to know the landlord's cell phone number so I could tell him about this." "What? I was actually on the phone just now." Elena furtively glanced at the still dismantled phone on the floor. "Really?" Cindy asked. "I thought the whole building's power went out. I could hear some of our neighbors complaining." "Oh? Maybe you have a generator running." Elena saw Cindy's eyes light up with hope, but Elena couldn't have Cindy here now. She needed to be with the stranger on the phone as soon as possible. So she gave Cindy the landlord's number immediately and promptly closed the door. Elena began picking up the pieces of the cordless phone when she noticed that the batteries were gone. She looked around the area until she got exhausted looking for it and decided that the handheld unit runs on the electricity from the base. She was about to turn on the phone when she remembered Cindy's comment about having no electricity for almost an hour. Elena started to notice that the room was quiet. She didn't hear the low hum of the refrigerator since her husband went to work. The electricity was definitely out for almost an hour. How the hell did the call with this stranger connected a few minutes ago? Not making any sense of what's happening, Elena went downstairs, the disassembled cordless phone in tow, and talked to the landlord to ask about the electricity and cordless phone that came with the apartment when she and her husband rented it. The landlord confirmed that the electricity went out an hour ago, and that the technician he called was working on it. Elena finally asked the landlord about the cordless phone. The landlord's face was suddenly alarmed when he saw the phone Elena was clutching. "That phone? I thought the police took it for evidence." "Police? Evidence?" Elena asked, confused. The landlord started to step back. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Kale. I admit that beautiful apartment is cheap because no one wants to take it." "Why?" Elena asked. A chilling cold started to seep into her stomach. The landlord turned away as if he didn't hear Elena's question. "Please, sir, I beg you. The police? Evidence?" Elena asked, scared out of her wits. Tears streamed down her face. What had she gotten into? Finally, the landlord turned to face her. His face was pale white. The previous tenant was murdered by his wife when she caught him cheating over the phone. "No, that couldn't be," Elena cried. The phone started to ring. She lived deep in the forest in a tiny cottage and sold herbal remedies for a living. Folks living in the town nearby called her Bloody Mary and said she was a witch. No one dared cross the old crone for fear that their cows would go dry, their food stores rot away before winter, their children take sick of fever, or any number of terrible things that an angry witch could do to her neighbors and their children. Then the little girls in the village began to disappear one by one. No one could find out where they had gone. Grief-stricken families searched the woods, the local buildings, and all the houses and barns, but there was no sign of the missing girls. A few brave souls even went to Bloody Mary's home in the woods to see if the witch had taken the girls, but she denied any knowledge of the disappearances. Still, it was noted that her haggard appearance had changed. She looked younger, more attractive. The neighbors were suspicious, but they could find no proof the witch had taken their young ones. Then came the night when the daughter of the miller rose from her bed and walked outside, following an enchanted sound no one else could hear. The miller's wife had a toothache and was sitting up in the kitchen treating the tooth with an herbal remedy when her daughter left the house. She screamed for her husband and followed the girl out of the door. The miller came running in his nightshirt. Together, they tried to restrain the girl, but she kept breaking away from them and heading out of town. The desperate cries of the miller and his wife woke the neighbors. They came to assist the frantic couple. Suddenly, a sharp-eyed farmer gave a shout and pointed towards a strange light at the edge of the woods. A few townsmen followed him out into the field and saw Bloody Mary standing beside a large oak tree, holding a magic wand that was pointed towards the miller's house. She was glowing with an unearthly light as she set her evil spell upon the miller's daughter. The townsmen grabbed their guns and their pitchforks and ran towards the witch. Once she heard the commotion, Bloody Mary broke off the spell and fled back into the woods. The far-sighted farmer had loaded his gun with silver bullets in case the witch ever came after his daughter. Now he took aim and shot at her. The bullet hit Bloody Mary in the hip and she fell to the ground. The angry townsmen leapt upon her and carried her back into the field, where they built a huge bonfire and burned her at the stake. As she burned, Bloody Mary screamed to curse the villagers. If anyone mentioned her name aloud before a mirror, she would send her spirit to revenge herself upon them for her terrible death. When she was dead, the villagers went to the house in the woods and found the unmarked graves of the little girls the evil witch had murdered. She had used their blood to make her young again. From that day to this, anyone foolish enough to chant Bloody Mary's name 3 times before a darkened mirror will summon the vengeful spirit of the witch. It is said that she will tear their bodies to pieces and rip their souls from their mutilated bodies. The souls of these unfortunate ones will burn in torment as Bloody Mary once was burned, and they will forever be trapped in the mirror. I feel it deep in my chest cavity, shifting relentlessly in the warm, damp darkness. It burrowed underneath my right scapula, searching for what, I do not know. It quietly gnaws my bones, and I can discern the tiniest traces of movement as it vigilantly stops at the meow of a nearby cat. Once the danger has passed, I feel the pressure as it steadies itself against a rib and tests the tensile strength of the tissues encasing it. Small claws tear into the muscle, and with each pass, the nerves send synchronized cascades of pinpricks down my back. Every so often, I feel a sudden, swift kick to my lung. It is persistently fighting the dense tissues, digging ever deeper into the cavernous expanse of my ribcage. There is a sharp stab of pain as it hits a nerve traveling down to my kidney. I shake myself, trying to deter it from continuing, and for a brief moment it lies in wait, listening to the steady beating of my heart. Again, it tears relentlessly at what is holding it back, and the nerves on either side of my body react in turn. A slight pain to the left that elicits a flinch, a sudden involuntary jerk of my head. My nerves are ablaze with confusion, trying desperately to decipher what is happening. With a terrible final slice, it has found its way in. I feel a weight on my lung, making its way down until it has found a soft spot by my stomach. It gently nestles itself into an empty space, and all I am left with is the erratic dance of impulses down my nerves as it falls into a deep slumber. Now, I will have to wait. Here's my story. Be 16, be black and have family down in Alabama. They farm and own a huge amount of land down in Huntsville. Uncle owns a big house and a bunch of trailers they put out in the woods for hunting or camping. Down south, cousins suggest we go out there to camp. Know I'm a city kid from Chicago, so they tease the fuck out of me. Collect food, kill a pig and some chickens, and bring necessities to camp out for a few days. We get to the camp and it's obvious something is weird. Air has this weird electric smell, like right before a storm, like ozone. We think nothing of it and unpack and go down to a little creek to swim for a few hours. All of a sudden, some older white guy and a white teenager come out of the bushes. He has a shotgun in the crook of his arms and says hello and asks us what we're doing this far back in the woods. Tell him about my uncle, who he knows, and say we're camping out. He tells us we need to be real careful out here and stick together. There was a big animal in the woods. His son, who is my age, asks if he can stay and hang out with us. He says okay. I'm going to stop green texting because the story is fairly long and the format is harder to write in. So we end up playing football, dicking around with me. There's the white kid Tanner, 5 of my cousins, and then 4 of their friends. In total, there were 5 girls and 6 boys. We all were around 15 to 17. We ended up just dicking the day away. So we head back to the camp and pulling out some stuff for a campfire, even though the trailers both had kitchenettes. Tanner says that his family's property sits up against my uncle's. He wants to run home and ask his dad if he can come out camping with us. My cousin Rooster says he's going to go with him since it's going to get dark soon. One of the girls also wants to tag along. It's about 7 o'clock and it's starting to get pretty dark. They take flashlights and take the trail towards Tan's property. The rest of us chill. We make s'mores, drink, and kiss on the girls. About 30 or 40 minutes later, there's the smell of ozone again. You could smell it over the smell of the fire we had started. It's really nasty coppery smell, like right after you've had a nosebleed and it stopped. It wasn't exactly like dried blood, but it was that nasty metallic back of your throat smell. We immediately think that it's some kind of electrical malfunction, or someone left a hot plate on or some shit. We search the trailers and nothing is on, and we can all smell it. All of a sudden, we can hear people booking down the path towards us, and Rooster, Tan, and the girl all come running into the clearing, out of breath. And they didn't even break stride, they all run into the trailer, right by where the fire is. We all get the fuck out of there and into the trailers. They end up calming down. Even Rooster is crying his fucking eyes out at this point. All the while, the fire is guttering lower and lower, so my other cousins say fuck it and are about to go outside to get the generator out of a shed between the trailers. Tanner goes, "Fuck no, ain't nobody else going outside." He's been crying too, and his eyes are bloodshot and puffy, and his pants are dirty as shit. He goes on to tell us that they went up to his house. His father said sure he could go out camping, but to make sure they were careful on the way back, and that maybe they should take one of the hunting rifles just in case. Evidently, Tanner had seen something in their yard a few days before. One of their pigs had come up, ripped up and half eaten. They assumed it was just some big cats or coyotes, even though they don't usually fuck with live animals. He had gone upstairs and packed his stuff, and told his dad they would be okay without the rifle because coyotes avoid people. So they started walking back towards where they were camping. So Rooster finally stops crying and shaking. The girl already had, but she was just staring out the window with a dumb look on her face. He says they had gotten halfway into the woods towards the camp when they started to hear shit in the forest. It was almost pitch black by this time, so they weren't sure at first what the fuck it was. The girl says that she heard something in the bushes right off the trail, and they all beamed their flashlights over there. And there was someone standing back in the woods in a little hollow. Rooster said they shouted at him, and told him that he was scaring the fuck out of them and what a dick he was. He says that's when he realized that the guy was facing away from them. So they kept walking, and they start smelling the nasty coppery ozone smell. They say that they look off into the forest on the opposite side, and it's a dude standing in the forest, backwards slightly closer to the path. So now they start power walking, and Tan keeps going, "I should have taken the fucking rifle." As they're telling the story, the smell is still super strong even inside the cabin. They say that after they started walking faster, a kind of low gibbering had started coming from both sides of the wood. And as they started booking it back to the trailer, the girl said she had flashed her flashlight out into the woods to the side of them and had seen something jerking itself through the woods. The gibbering just got louder and louder, and when they could see the light from our campfire, something had come out of the woods about 40 yards behind them onto the track, and they had just flat out ran as hard as they could to the trailer. So we're out in the fucking woods, and we're assuming at this point it's some rednecks or some shit trying to fuck with us. All of a sudden, my other cousin Junior, who starts going on about how he went to school with a native kid that was telling him about the goat man or some shit. We probably tell him to shut the fuck up because we don't need any spooky talk right now. But he just keeps going on and on about how it's the fucking goat man and how we're in his woods and blah blah blah. Now, at the time, I had never heard of this goat man or any of that. But then a couple years ago, the year before I graduated from college, I had a Menom for a roommate and I ended up asking him about it. And to sum it up, it's basically a fucking man with the head of a goat and he can shapeshift and he gets among groups of people to terrorize them. It's also supposed to be kind of like the Wendigo, and it's bad mojo to even talk about it, and even worse if you see it. Keep in mind, I didn't know this back when I was 16, so my cousin is going, "The goat man's gonna get in and fucking get us." The girls are all terrified and my cousins and I are all fucking trying to figure out if it's just some hillbillies or if it's some animal. So all of a sudden, the smell just goes away. Like, to this day, I haven't even experienced anything like it. Like, usually smells fade away or lessen. It just literally was there 1 second and then not the second. So, it's after an hour, making it around 9 or 10. We've stopped shitting bricks enough to go back outside and stoke the fire again. We figure it's just some assholes trying to fuck with us, so we don't go back home, because we think if we do, they'll chase us through the woods or some crazy shit. Nothing else weird happens that night, and we stay another night. And for the main part of the night, nothing happens. At about 1 in the morning, we're outside getting drunk and telling ghost stories. As someone is finishing some too spooky story, I don't remember what about, the smell comes back. It's so fucking strong that one of the girls literally starts vomiting. I stand up and you can actually feel how clammy the air is. I say we should get inside and this isn't right. We should have just fucking left. We all go back inside and we're standing around. My cousin just keeps going on about how it's the goat man, and my cousin Rooster tries to shut him the fuck up, and all the while I'm just feeling that something is wrong and I can't figure out what the fuck it is. We end up sitting in there for a while. The smell is just as strong and we're terrified and all huddled in this camper. We end up cooking brats for everybody because nobody wants to go outside. It's one of those packs with 4 brats. We have a total of 3 packs. I grill them up on the stove and give everybody a hot dog. I get mine. After a while, one of my cousins gets up and goes over to the pot to get another one. He starts grumbling about how I get 2 brats and everybody else only got 1. And I look at him like he's fucking stupid. I tell him that everybody only got 1 because there were only 12 brats. If he wants more, he should open up a new pack and cook some more. That's when the girl that had been out with Rooster and Tan just starts screaming, "Oh Jesus, oh Lord, get it out!" She's crying and shivering, and then it dawns on the cousin standing up what the fuck is wrong. Me and him both glance around the room, and then I feel my heart fucking sink. I run the fuck out of the cabin and the girls run out with us. The trailer door is banging against the side of the trailer as everybody books out of the cabin. One of my cousin's friends asks us what the fuck was wrong. I start counting us. There's only 11 now. I shit you not, my cousin verified. There had been 12 people in the cabin. But being that everybody didn't really know each other very well, nobody had really noticed the whole fucking time that there was an extra person. And then I realized earlier that I'd kind of noticed something was off. You know how when you're just dicking around having a good time that you don't sweat the smallest shit? And you don't always keep track of certain stuff? I'm dead sure that someone else had been in the trailer with us, and that they had been there for at least a fucking day, eating with us. What makes it worse is I could figure out which one because I don't think anyone ever actually interacted with the other person / the goat man. The girl kept praying to Jesus and we're all sitting outside. Eventually we get big ass sticks and go back to the cabin, but there's nobody in there. We count again and there's 11 people. We go back into the trailer and lock the door. We explain what the fuck happened and the girl says that she realized too, and that when he was about to say something, the person sitting next to her had grabbed her leg hard and leaned over towards her and said something she couldn't understand. So we're all pretty much scared as fuck as we huddle together and I fall asleep. When I wake up, the sun is just coming up and half the people are asleep and the other half are packing our shit up. We all want to walk back home, but like 4 people want to stay until the sun is all the way up. And some people think that we're just fucking around and still want to stay at the trailers. I just want to get the fuck out of the woods. The girl's name was Kiera, the one that the goat man had touched. Anyway, I asked her if she really thinks it was something bad, and she says she just wants to go home and she doesn't want to be out in the woods alone for another night. So we decide to split up. The 4 that want to go can go, but I have to stay because I have the keys to the cabin and it's my uncle's and I have to lock up. I'm super pissed at this point because I feel like people aren't taking this shit seriously, and I definitely didn't want to be out in the woods for another night. I spend the rest of the day trying to convince the rest of the people, now 4 girls and 4 guys, to get the fuck out of Dodge. Tanner leaves with them to go get a rifle and says he's going to be back. So there are just 7 of us left by 4 p.m. At around 5 p.m., he hadn't made it back yet, and we're getting extremely fucking antsy, and the only reason I stopped begging them to go back was because he went to get a gun. It's about 5:30 p.m. or so, when the one cousin that did stay says that the girl Kiara is outside. We all look outside, and sure enough, she's standing by the fire pit with her back to the cabin. I'm thinking to myself, if she was so fucking scared, why the hell would she come back? And then I get this nasty feeling in my gut. Keep in mind, the whole time the coppery smell has been gone. Now I realize I can smell just a twinge of it. I say this to the rest of them and everybody, and these are the people that wanted to stay in the fucking woods after we had the goddamn goat man in our midst, is laughing at me and asking if I set this up to scare them. I'm looking at them like, I'm not fucking bullshitting you at all right now. I asked them why the fuck I would play like that. So one of the girls goes outside to get Kiera. She gets halfway to her and stops cold. Kiera starts heaving. I don't know how the fuck to describe it. Sort of like if someone with their back turned was laughing without actually making any sound. It was this fact that made me realize that there was not a fucking sound in the whole woods. It was dead silent. This was like later in September, so it was still fairly hot at the time, but it was super chilly some days too. and you can usually hear big-ass geese honking or some kind of birds or squirrels chit-chatting. So I step out the door and tell her to get back in the fucking trailer right goddamn now. She backs up into the trailer and we lock the fucking door. We pull down all the shades except one and put a guy there in a chair to watch her. She stands there for another 20 minutes or so. The guy turns to say that she's still there, and there's a huge fucking bang on the door. We all jump the fuck up and scramble around the living room of the trailer. The banging is super fucking loud. So now my cousin's holding one of the girls and the other two are kind of giggling with nervous laughter, and me and the other two guys are shitting bricks. Then we hear Tan. He's screaming, "Let me the fuck in! Stop fucking playing!" So we go over to the door and open it, and he stumbles in with a rifle. There's nobody else outside. Evidently, he had walked up to the campsite. Nothing weird happened in the forest, but he had seen a girl. Mind you, he said it was not Kiara standing there. When he had gotten to the edge of the clearing, she had turned toward him with a slack-jawed look and just stared him down, slowly tracking him as he walked around the outside of the clearing towards the camp. He said it wasn't until he was almost halfway to the trailer he had realized that she was getting closer to him. She had started off by the fire, and without him even seeing her move, she had been turning, inching closer. He said he just ran the rest of the way back to the cabin thinking it would open, and when he got to the door and it was locked, he turned and it was about half the distance to the door. He looks around the room and then gets super pale. He pulls me to the side and whispers in my ear, "You know, there's only 7 of us in here, right?" I get that feeling where your stomach drops to your nuts. It had been back inside the trailer while we were sorting out who was going where, and then, when we all went outside to talk earlier in the day, it has just slipped right back in. We looked out the window and there's nobody there. So we recount everyone and then basically, I go over and ask everyone how many people were here earlier, and everybody says 8. I say, "Well, how many are here now?" They all do the count and then realize there were only now 7 people in the cabin. So Tan had brought back a couple boxes of ammo and his rifle, and he had told his dad that there was some kind of animal in the forest because he didn't think his dad would believe him if he said it was Goat Man. He says that his cousin is supposed to be coming down in a few hours, and that in the morning we can all go back to his place and his cousin will drive us home. Now I'm really fucking terrified. But I at least feel better because we can be American and shoot the fuck out of whatever it is if it comes back. But then my cousin gets into this huge argument with one of the girls because she thinks that I'm trying to be funny and prank them, and that she's getting really scared and that I'm not funny. He keeps telling her I'm not that kind of person, and she says, "Well, how do we know the girl wasn't just Tanner in a wig? Or if it's really the Goat Man, how do we know that this is the real Tanner and that Goat Man just didn't kill Tanner in the woods and take his gun?" So we fucking get into a huge argument about this, where me and Tanner are like, we could seriously be in danger because at the very least someone has been sneaking themselves into our fucking trailer without us knowing and mingling with us, and at worst, something bad is in the forest fucking with us. One of the girls is crying and saying she wants to go right now, and we're trying to tell her we shouldn't because none of us are walking through the woods in the middle of the night. At this point, the sun is starting to go down and it's getting a little cloudy out. We eat something and turn on the radio for a while, but we can't really get a station out there with anything decent. So we turn it off, and about the time that Tan's cousin shows up, he was 19 I think. At this point, the sun is just barely over the horizon and he has one of those heavy-duty lantern flashlights and another rifle. He walks up to the trailer and we whisper to Tan, asking if he's sure that's his cousin, and he says yes. The guy looks behind him and all around the camp, then walks in. Kind of glances at all of us and looks a little confused. He says, "Where's your other little buddy at? I figured she would meet me up at the cabin. Is she a little slow or something?" He also asked whether we had been cooking blood in the cabin, because it smelled like blood in hot pans all the way up the trail. We were all like, fucking nope. But we asked him what the fuck he's talking about with the girl he saw. He had come down the same trail Tan had been using, and he had come up on one of you guys' buddies, standing in the middle of the trail looking at him slack-jawed. He had asked her a bunch of questions, but all she did was just look at him. Then she smiled at him, and he said he kept walking. She couldn't seem to keep up with him and kept lagging a little behind him. He said he asked her if she was hurt or something, and if she needed any help, but she had continued to stare. Eventually, he had been walking and turned around a bend in the trail. But when he turned around and went back to see if she was okay, the trail was empty. He'd assumed she had taken some shortcut through the woods to our trailer. We tell him the whole story of what's been going on. I have expected him to say we were full of shit, but he just listened and then sat down on the couches in the living room. Tanner's cousin gets back to the girl. He says when she had kept trying to lag behind him, it had kind of weirded him the fuck out, so he tried to keep her in front of him, but no matter how slow he walked, she was always lagging a little behind, and then he smelled this nasty smell and it got stronger as he got to the camp. Eventually it got really strong. She had said something really low that he didn't catch, and when he had turned around, she had been right the fuck up on him, and he stepped back from her. It was at this point he asked her if she was okay, and if she wasn't, him to carry her back the rest of the way, and she just kept staring. He said he reached out for her, as in to grab her on the shoulder, but he must have misjudged the distance, because she was off to the side of where he had put his hand, like she had moved while he was looking dead at her. So at this point, we know this shit's real unless Tan is playing a joke, which we can tell he's not because he's almost pissing his pants. So they load up their rifles, we eat some more, and we just kind of sit around until about 11. To this fucking day, every time I think about this, I really pray to God that it's some huge prank that my cousins played on me and just never revealed so I would shit for the rest of my life. At round 11, the stink of copper turns into an actual nasty, gross blood-like smell, like cooking blood and singed hair. Tan and his cousin Reese get the fuck up instantly and grab the rifles. There's like a half knocking, half clawing at the door, and I shit you not, there's this voice, and it sounds like when you see those YouTube cats and dogs whose owners teach them how to talk. It says in this halting, weirdly toned voice, "Let me the fucking stop fucking playing." It made my fucking nuts creep up against my body, and one of the girls just starts crying and calling on Jesus. It was so fucking obviously not a person talking. It didn't have the right cadence, and that's some shit I never realized until that moment. But all people have a certain cadence when they talk, no matter what language. All people have a certain kind of rhythm to talking. This shit didn't have any kind of cadence or rhythm. One of those YouTube cats, that's what the fuck it sounded like outside the door. So now I'm in full-on terror mode. We keep yelling outside, "Who is it? Stop fucking around, man." And it just keeps saying, "In," or "Let me the fucking," for almost 15 minutes. It sounded like this YouTube video almost, just not funny. Sorry for being on a tangent, but if you can't imagine how this shit sounded, then you can't imagine how fucked up the whole situation was. So then the smell goes away for a while, and for the next hour or so, you can hear someone basically creeping around in the woods and shit. Every couple minutes it'll come back into the door and say something. Finally, when the smell fades away, it's around 2 in the morning right now, Reese says, "Man, fuck this," and opens the door and walks outside with his rifle. He fires a shot into the air and says something to the effect of, "In the name of Jesus Christ, go away!" He fires 2 more times, and then from the woods right up against the river across from the trailer, it sounds like something is slowly gibbering and hooting. Then it starts screaming, and it sounds almost like a woman and a cat in a bag screaming together. Like, I seriously have never heard any shit like that, and you can hear the brush over that way start to shake. Reese fires over into the tree line and then starts backing into the house. We lock the door, and we can hear this shit keening and screaming. Reese says something had come out of the bushes, super low to the ground and crawling towards the cabin. He had shot at it. Pretty much, this was how the rest of the night went. It was literally screaming constantly for the next 2 hours, and we could hear shit moving out into the tree line. But it never came back up to the cabin until everyone had finally fallen asleep. Tan had been sitting in the chair watching the door with his rifle. Nobody else heard or saw this, and he told me 2 days later after the whole thing was over. He said he had been nodding off after the screaming and noises finally stopped, and he had been almost asleep when he saw someone come out of the bathroom and then lay down in the middle of the floor and go to sleep. He just assumed it was one of us and he had nodded off. Then he said he kind of realized something was wrong, and while pretending to be sleeping, he counted us. There were 9 people in the cabin. He basically didn't want to try to shoot at the fucking thing in the cabin and have it kill us all then and there, or have Reese wake up and start shooting and then we kill ourselves. So he just stayed awake all night, pretending to be asleep. He said sometimes it would stand up and kind of do this weird jittery thing, or heave like it was laughing, but then it would lay back down. The story closes pretty weak, because from my perspective, nothing happened. We woke up, and I noticed that Tan was a little jittery, and that he was avoiding looking at all of us. But we ate some breakfast, packed up, and started walking to his house. He stayed last in the cabin and said he'd lock up and bring me my uncle's keys to start just walking and he'd catch up, which I didn't really want to fucking do. We got a little bit up the path, and when he came running up, basically we just jogged back to his house. His cousin took us home. There was a window in the bathroom. Tan had gone back to lock up and looked in there. We were too stupid to lock a screenless window. The window was fucked up when he went in there. I'm guessing it had been doing that all along, waiting for us to fall asleep or slip up and then getting in among us. It walked with us all the goddamn way back to his house, and then he said it lagged to the back of the group and looked him dead in the eyes before walking into the woods. Day 1. Today I awoke to the sound of screams. It was 3 a.m. I wasn't completely aware of what was happening in the world around me. It was pitch black in my room. I quickly jumped from my bed and frantically searched for the light switch. I turned on the lights and could not believe my eyes. There was nothing. The room was exactly as it was before. Nothing misplaced. Exactly the same. I walked to the window that stared down to the street from my third-story apartment. The night was calm, nothing out of the ordinary. But what were those screams? I probably just imagined them. I went back to sleep. Day 2. This morning there were no screams, just soft voices. But these voices did not go away. I tried my best to ignore them. I went through my day. As the day progressed, the voices grew louder and harder to ignore. It reached a point at which I couldn't stand it any longer. I screamed, "Stop it!" Everyone stared at me with eyes of worry and confusion. I fainted. Day 3. What the hell is going on? I asked myself. The voices in my head were as loud as ever and only worsening. But that is not the worst of the matter. I awoke to a frightening sight. Somehow, I was at my bed, in my apartment, but above me was a woman, hung by a noose. My heart stopped as I stared at the woman for what felt like hours, waiting for something to happen. I tried to move out of my bed, but as soon as I tried, the woman grabbed my arm and screamed. Her scream sounded familiar, but there was no time to think. I was able to release myself from her tight grasp. I ran. I ran as fast as I could. I could feel something eerie trailing not far behind me. I was too scared to look. The time to me was unknown. It was not complete day outside, but neither night. It was the twilight point of the day. I sprinted for as long as I could. I decided to stop to catch my breath. Big mistake. Whatever was behind me caught up. I couldn't bring myself to scream. Fear enveloped my lungs. I could feel my chest tightening. I couldn't move. I felt bony fingers wrap around my shoulders, a cold breath on my neck. It spun me around with an unexpected might. There it was. I saw its face. It was the woman. I stared deeply into her eyes and understood. I blacked out. Day 4. I now understand. All that I was feeling, all the screaming, was her. It was her along with all the others. The ones from the other world. They were communicating with me from my inside. They wanted to tell me what to do. They need me to provide a mortal to them. Even ghosts need to feast. But who to choose? Of the millions out there. Perhaps the one sitting on their computer right now, reading this article. Yes, that will do. Dear Steve, I don't have much time because they're after me. They're always after me. Relentless and foul beasts, hell-bent on capturing and torturing me for centuries. I know you think I'm dead, Steve, and you'd be right to assume that, because I am. But it isn't over for me. I forfeited the right to a peaceful afterlife when I killed myself. The council determined that. I know you're a Christian, Steve, and... shit, so was I. But there is no heaven and no God. All there is peace and hell. The council is a group of 300 bodies, 150 demons, and 150 saints. Again, no angels, who decide whether the deceased gets to rest in peace or be damned to eternity in hell. The council decides this by looking at your life and examining it for crimes or sin. But what they spend the most time examining is the way you died. If you were murdered, for example, you could opt to rest permanently, or they could choose to inhabit a newly born child. This rule also stands for children and in some cases virgins. Don't really get this, but whatever. If you died naturally and lived a mostly crime-free life, you get to rest. But as you already know, I committed suicide, which is an automatic entry to hell. It's pretty fucked up, but what can you do? Anyway, I want you to say sorry to my family, the rest of my friends, and of course, Steph. Tell them that it wasn't their fault. Oh, and tell Steph that I will always love her. They're close now, so I'm going to finish this letter. God, I can hear their insane chittering. They know in here where everyone is. You can't run forever. You can run for decades, centuries, millennia, but they will catch you sooner or later. Time is different here. A day here is about a second to the living. I can smell them now. They are so close. Sincerely, Derek. P.S. I pray to God that you don't end up here. You haven't forgotten me already, have you? Surely it hasn't been that long since my last visit. I'm still buried away in there, in the dark recesses of your mind. Surprised to see me? Come on, not even a smile? I've seen that look before. Don't even think about it. One wrong move, one single insolent thought, and I will sever your connection to this mortal coil permanently, and then you will have the privilege of serving me in a more direct manner. You served me so perfectly last time that I just could not help coming to pay you one last visit. You were not the first, nor the last, but your service is truly second to none. And I, of course, deserve nothing but the best. You see, the time has come. My followers have become restless. Some would call them impatient. I, however, would call them eager to please. Day after day, they worship me. They perform my tasks, provide me the stepping stones that I desire to achieve my ultimate goal. They scream out my name with righteousness in their hearts, and oh, how righteous they are. Well, depending on your point of view, of course. Don't be alarmed. There's no punishment for laughter in my presence. In fact, I encourage it. I hope you enjoy every moment of what is about to come. Look deeper into yourself, my child. We are similar in certain ways, you and I. We both wish to break the shackles that bind us to the living hell that we find ourselves residing in. Relax. Breathe deeply. Struggle not, and remember that I give no being the kindness of asking twice. It would be a stain on my reputation. Embrace the freedom that is yet to come. It is so close that you can almost hear the cries of those resenting their foolishness, cursing their ignorance to my otherworldly influence on this insignificant blemish that you dare to call a world. You will feel the ecstasy surging through you as you tear this vile planet into atoms in my name. The non-believers will curse me, damn me, as they have damned themselves. There will be no place for them in my new plane of existence. But you, my son, will never be forgotten. Say my name. You know it well. Hush now, my child. It is finally beginning. Prepare yourself, for it shall all be over in an instant, and then you may rest for eternity. Go now. Do as I command. You'll be seeing me again, ever so shortly. 3 days ago, I killed my mother. I regret it now, but she drove me to do it. She was suffering from psychosis, under the delusion every day that I was constantly lying to her and plotting something horrible. She would scream at me, smash cups and plates. It sometimes got so bad that she would attack me. I was planning to save up enough money to move out and get her some professional help, but I just couldn't take the stress. I threw her down the stairs one night when she attacked me, which resulted in her neck breaking. Her mental health record was enough for investigators to accept that it was an accident. Today was her funeral day, and my family members offered their condolences before and after the service. I felt awful knowing that if they knew the truth, their words may have been filled with hatred and resentment instead of sympathy. We then headed to my Aunt Victoria's place for the rapist. I had come out into the back garden in an attempt to escape the suffocating attention I was receiving from my family. It was then when I saw my 8-year-old cousin Rebecca sitting alone on the bench, whispering softly as if she was talking to someone. I approached her out of curiosity and in hope that her adorable naive charm would cheer me up. "Hey Rebecca, what are you doing out by yourself?" I asked her in the soft tone one would usually take when talking to a child as I sat down next to her on the bench. She didn't answer me for about 5 seconds. Instead, she just stared at me with a look of pity and concern in her eyes, then took a quick small breath and opened her mouth to speak.
"Alex, why did you hurt Auntie Jane?"
My heart sunk at those words she had uttered so innocently to me. I froze up and felt my body begin to sweat profoundly as the rate of my heartbeat climbed steadily. I swallowed hard and took a deep breath before attempting to respond to her. "Well, what makes you think that, Rebecca?" I asked her as my shaking voice broke the silence.
"Aunt Jane told me so."
My jaw dropped.
"She's sitting right there,"
she announced somberly as she pointed to the seat opposite of her. I made her promise me that she wouldn't tell a soul about the truth of my mother's death. That little girl could ruin my entire life with just one sentence. Alex killed Auntie Jane. And that, more than anything, terrifies me to the very core of my existence. One day, I may just have to kill her too. You're sitting in your room, bored out of your mind. You try reading a book and watching some TV, but you eventually find yourself looking out the window. As you look out, you notice something by the edge of the forest. This thing is completely white. You think to yourself, it can't be the snow. This is because it is dark out, but this thing seems to dismiss the darkness, like it is unaffected by any of its surroundings. Succumbing to curiosity, you put on a coat and march out of your house. The snow shrouds your vision until you finally reach the place where the white thing was. But when you get there, you find nothing. "I could have sworn there was something white out here," you mumble to yourself, deciding to go back home. But upon completing your second step, you kick something. It's a flashlight. "Oh, it was a flashlight. I must have run out of batteries while I was walking." But then another thought comes into your head. What's a flashlight doing out here? You figure someone dropped it on the way into the woods. You grab the flashlight and head into the forest, hoping to find the owner. And you do, after a while. You're horrified at what you see. It's a man hanging upside down on a tree, his guts ripped out, with blood dripping on the torn up backpack under him. You nearly throw up, and because of your utter disgust, you fail to see that the tree he is hanging on is different from the others. It's extraordinarily thin, with very neatly aligned branches. And it's white. Completely, utterly white. Upon realizing this, you think, That's no tree. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still, until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time staring at him. And then he started moving toward me again. He took giant, exaggerated, tiptoed steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone. Except he was moving very, very quickly. I like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all. But I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen as the smiling man crept toward me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper. What? Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there, smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started dance walking away, just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off of the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane, and that's a very, very scary thing to see. There is a legend circulating around the television industry. It is about Channel Infinity. Channel Infinity is hard to get to, and reports vary as to what it actually is. I will tell you how to get there and then what to do. Acquire a television, preferably with analog for the best experience, and the older the better. Acquire a remote control. Does not have to go with the television you're using. Turn on the TV and set it to a channel that is static, or just a plain black screen if you're using a digital TV. Basically, any channel you do not receive. Leave the room for about 3 hours. If you have a significant other in the house, have them with you. It is also best to call over a few friends. During those 3 hours, you should acquire a few items. I will list them in order from the most important to the least. Note, none of these are mandatory, but they help. You will want an item that you hold dear, 2 handheld mirrors, a firearm or any other weapon, a favorite book, a mobile communications device, a key, a sledgehammer or pickaxe. After roughly 3 hours have passed, re-enter the room. Have everyone else wait outside the door. Close the door. Stare at the static or blank screen or whatever you set the TV to until you feel disoriented or freaked out. Call the others into the room. Give the item that you hold dear to the person that you care about the most in the room. Then send them back out. If you did not grab an item that you hold dear, hug that person and whisper a secret in their ear. Send them back out and command them to not come back in no matter what until you open the door again. Note, this will be harder for them if there are more of them, but it will be easier for you if there are more people. Trust me. Hold the mirrors so that one is reflecting the television screen into the other, and the second is reflecting you, so it looks as if the television is behind you. Stay like this until a question appears on the screen. If you did not grab the mirrors, then sit in a chair facing away from the TV until you hear a noise. Grab the remote. There will be a question on the screen. Press channel up to answer yes, channel down to answer no. There will be anywhere from 3 to 26 questions. If reports are to be trusted, the questions will be anywhere from trivial to deep philosophical personal questions. Answer truthfully or you will not succeed in reaching Channel Infinity. After the questions, one of 3 things will happen. 1. Your favorite show of all time will come on, but in the episode, all the characters will be heart-wrenchingly killed. 2. You will see a picture of your least favorite person or thing ever. This is where you will use the firearm or other weapon. Break the TV screen with the weapon. It will then fix itself. Note, this is obviously the easiest of the 3 things. 3. A strange shimmery vortex will surround you, and you will be pulled into an alternate dimension. If you find yourself here, here's what to do. You will find yourself in a twisted replica of your house. You will need to go to your room, where you will find the 4 items listed that you will need for this part. Take them. Exit your house. Outside will be a more evil-looking version of our world with red sky, a gray sun, dark orange plants, and an ever-present thin vermilion mist. You must go to the nearest public building. An example is school, mall, gas station, etc. Use the key on the door and enter. The key will fit the lock. If you did not get a key, climb in through a window. Upon entering, find a room with only 1 entrance. Sit down and begin reading the book. If you did not get a book, just sit down and be bored or scared. You will hear footsteps outside of the door sometime within the next hour. Don't look up from the book. After you can no longer hear the footsteps, count to 250 out loud. Every 10 numbers, you will hear another footstep closer and closer to the door. Upon reaching 250, you will hear a knock on the door. If there are 3 knocks, open the door. If there are 4, say "I forbid you" twice, and then open the door. You will see a stone statue of someone you love deeply outside of the door. It could be a family member, best friend, romantic partner, or even a fictional character. Smash its head to bits with a sledgehammer or pickaxe. If it is female, also destroy the left hand. If you did not get the hammer or pick, push the statue over. Exit the building from the entrance you came in through. It will be night. Look at the moon. It will be either pink or green, and either full or half. If it is pink and half, pull out the phone and call your 3rd most recent contact. Pink and full, pull out the phone and dial a random number. Before they pick up, bite through your tongue. If you did not get the device, pretend to do the things above. Green and half, strip off all your clothing and sprint back to your house. Don't look behind you no matter what. green and full. To put it bluntly, you're screwed. You'll be dead within half an hour. If it is one of the first three, you will wake up in front of the television and you can continue the ritual. After this, you will have reached channel infinity. What you do now is up to you. If you go to the guide function, you will see shows listed such as The Meaning of Life or How to Acquire True Love. Choose one. Note, the more people you have outside the door with you determines the revelations that are the shows. The more people, the better chance you have of seeing shows with more life-changing results. Or, you keep watching the static without going to guide or breaking eye contact with the television, you will see a series of images that will, if deciphered, reveal the answer to your greatest question. There are, at this point, many options. Too many to write here. Just do what you feel like you must, and something will happen. The overwhelming majority of things will be good, but some will be bad. You may leave the room at any point. However, there are two catches. You may never speak of what you learned after accessing Channel Infinity, and you may only reach Channel Infinity 4 times in your life. I hope you find the experience enlightening. I was 13 years old when I stopped trick-or-treating. The other kids weren't so eager to give up free candy, but something happened that year. Something awful. My friends Owen, Drew, and I were out trekking for candy when we came to a house that had a big bowl of it sitting on the porch. The sign above it read, "Please take just one." We joked about swiping it all, but Owen and Drew only took a few each, enough to make them feel like badass kids. I'd always been afraid to take more than one because I was intimidated by authority. Sure, it was just a sign, and it usually meant that the owner wasn't home, but I was a timid kid who always did what he was told. Owen and Drew explained how that house did the same thing every year and that people rarely saw the guy who lived there. They dared me to do what they were too chicken to, so I decided to see what it felt like to do something naughty. We looked around to make sure no one was watching, and I poured the contents of the bowl into my bag. The three of us ran down the street laughing and shoving each other. Part of me expected someone to chase after us. In hindsight, I was right to be concerned. At Owen's house, we dumped out and sorted all of our yummy treasures. I tried to offer him and Drew some of the contraband candy, but they refused. I remember Owen saying, "That's all you, dude," and Drew shouting, "I don't want your tainted treats." Granted, they weren't entirely serious, but I was annoyed that they weren't sharing in the responsibility. Enough to go home instead of sleeping over. That night, I was torn from a sugar-fueled dream by a hand over my mouth and a knife to my neck. The skin was rough and the blade was ice cold. It was just slightly pressing into my skin, ready to slit my throat at a moment's notice. My body went stiff. I wanted to scream, but then a gruff voice whispered, "Don't make a fucking sound." At first, I didn't realize what was happening. Were we being burglarized? Then, I got my answer. "Can't you read, you little shit? The sign said, just one. Just fucking one." I'll never forget those words and the sickening smell of his breath. He went on to explain how every year he would catch kids taking 2 or 3 pieces of candy, which always infuriated him. It wasn't until I took the entire bowl that he finally snapped. Why did I do something so stupid? I was terrified and humiliated at the same time. "You like candy, you little shit?" he asked me, so I shook my head as much as I could despite his hand pressing against my face. He then removed it, still holding the knife to my neck, and proceeded to shove unwrapped candy into my mouth. I tried not to inhale, but I couldn't help it. I could feel things pushing against the back of my throat as I whimpered and drooled. I started to gag, but he put his hand back over my mouth so I wouldn't cough anything up. I truly believed I was going to die, and I feared for my friends as well. My short life flashed quickly before my eyes. All I could think in that moment was, how could an adult hate children this much? Everything I presumed about them was suddenly a lie. They weren't infallible, and their authority wasn't always law. Fine, so I took all this guy's candy. Did I really deserve to die? As I contemplated this for the first time, expecting to suffocate to death, my father rushed into the room, grabbed my metal desk chair, and beat the living daylights out of the guy. I never loved my dad so much as I did that night. I'm an adult now, and I live alone in a nice house on a quiet street with lots of kids. Every Halloween, I leave a basket on my front stoop full of candy with a sign that reads, "Take as many as you want." The light blow of a frigid wind had begun to settle in Valleywood, bringing the fall season in with it. What were originally plain green leaves were now replaced by the invigorating colors of red, orange, yellow, and brown. Every so often a leaf would glide down, landing gracefully with the wind as its only guide. It was October, and the valley was filled with the warm, welcoming faces of jack-o'-lanterns and folks who were enjoying the nice weather. The valley, although it was mostly a small place to live in, was always bustling during October and the Halloween season. Many kids would come down to the valley, old and young, as a place to hang out due to the lack of people. I was 18 at this time, and my job was going to be handing out candy from our spooky manor. My parents would often get some frightening material, some real and others corny. Our house was often the most decorated, and I remember as a kid I had always loved to go out and play pretend during the Halloween season. Just because our house would look like a ghost house, or a cemetery, or something of that sort, I was excited this year, just because it would be one of my first years giving out candy, and I would be able to scare the snot out of some little kids. All was going according to plan, except when my mother told me I had to go out trick-or-treating with Rachel, my little sister, this year. But Mom, I was going... Sweetie, you can't be arguing with me about some kid's holiday. Just go with Rachel for the night, and when you get back, you can do your little scare fest. Besides, you know how much she hates horror movies. She'll probably get too scared and want to go home. Although my mother's words were true, I still took them as a dart to my heart. Mostly because I was excited to scare the snot out of these kids. But I digressed and thought about how there was always next year. About a week before Halloween night, Rachel and I went out to go buy her a costume, and one for me to use to scare the kids. I chuckled when I went up to Rachel with my large bat head mask and tapped her shoulder saying, "Hey Rach, boo." Of course she jumped and then realized it was me, pouting and yelling about how it wasn't funny. To me, it was hysterical. I went off to the scare section to see what I could find. There are a lot of the oldies, Grim Reaper, Frankenstein, Hanging Man, all that junk. Nothing really popped out at me, so I decided to just grab a zombie makeup kit and leave it at that. Walking towards Rachel, I was happy to see she had picked out a Tinkerbell costume and was wearing its tiara. I walked over and smiled. Well, Tinkerbell is going with a zombie to get candy this year, huh? At first, she was a bit shocked and jumped, thinking something scary was behind her, but then she saw my face and immediately began grinning.
Big brother, I want you to meet somebody. He helped me pick between Cinderella and Tinkerbell,
she exclaimed, face full of excitement. Rachel pointed me to a boy about her size and age who was hunkered over looking at many different princess and fairy costumes. I was trying to hold in all my laughter, seeing the boy rummaging through the fairy wands and tiaras. That was until I actually got to see what he looked like.
Hey, I want you to meet my brother,
Rachel said, tugging on the boy's black, white, and gray striped jacket. The boy turned around to first stare at Rachel, but then moved on to me. All the laughter that I had held in was now replaced by curiosity on the boy's mask. He was wearing a dome-shaped mask that covered all of his face besides his thick brown hair. He had a hood on which concealed most of his hair, and I remember his jeans being very dark. But the most eerie feature about him was the mask. It was a mirror, and not like the chrome masks you see at Party City, but an actual mirror material. There was no expression to it, no lines except a few scratches that would cover the mask, and the only thing I could see was my shocked face staring back at itself. I realized how rude I was actually being, and I put my hand out smiling. "Hi there, I like your mask. Is that a real mirror?" The boy just seemed to look at my hand with his mirror mask and slowly nodded, not uttering a word. His silence seemed quite odd. I suspected him to be a mute, but then again, he just might have been shy about meeting me. "Okay, come on, Rach. We gotta get going. Mom is making spaghetti for dinner."
Aw, okay, bye. I hope I see you on Halloween.
The boy nodded at Rachel, continuing to stare at me though, my face reflecting in his mask. As we were leaving, I glanced back at him to see him rummaging through the princess costumes again, not bothering a soul. The week went by rather quickly. Rachel often complained about having to go to school on Halloween, and myself complained about having to watch Rach for the night. My mother told me that the zombie makeup would give Rachel nightmares, and so I had to go dressed up as nothing. This made me furious, but I decided it was too early to scare kids anyways, and that when Rachel went to bed, I could get ready. She went down in her Tinkerbell costume, giddy to go outside. My mother kissed her on the cheek, then looked at me sternly. "Be good. Don't scare Rachel. Understand?" I nodded, Rachel holding onto my hand in an attempt to drag me out the door. We walked down a few blocks, Rachel's bag growing bigger and bigger until I noticed a group of teenage boys riding their bikes our way. Of course, I can only assume they were boys, being that each of them were masked in a creepy costume, such as Freddy Krueger or Chucky. One kid had a mask that just plain disturbed me. A mask of a man whose face was completely disfigured by barbed wire and whose eyes were gouged out. Rachel began to squeak nervously when they were approaching us, but I told her they would not bother us if I was there. I must have forgotten how rude teens could be because they came straight up to us, the two in the back snickering as the ringleader made Rachel scream with a loud boo. "Look, fellas, the baby is crying." The boy left, followed by his goons. I was really irritated by this and looked at them sternly. "Knock it off." This was countered by some rousing ohs and laughter. The ringleader snickered and looked at me with his grotesque mask.
Why don't you just make us then?
At this, I smiled and drove my fist into the kid's stomach. He fell off the bike coughing a bit, then got up angrier.
Oh, you're in for it now, you little shit.
Suddenly, the two boys in the back were on my sides, holding me down to the ground. I struggled to break free, but their weight surpassed what I could outdo. Rachel was crying, and the leader of the group began to kick my stomach in multiple times.
How's it feel, bitch?
The kid yelled as he kept kicking my stomach and my face. Rachel tried to muster up all of her courage to hit the attacker with her fairy wand, but in retaliation, he kicked her away. Not satisfied with my little to nothing reactions, his attention was focused onto Rachel.
Aw, a little princess thinks she can do shit. Ha!
I watched in terror as he advanced towards the cowering Rachel, picking her up as if to hit her. "Get away from her!" I screamed, only to be punched by one of his cronies. Suddenly, the brute dropped Rachel and began to let out a bellowing screech. I sat wide-eyed as the leader screamed louder than anything I had ever heard, holding his face shaking like a dog. The cronies released me to see what was wrong with him, as I took my chance to dash towards the crying Rachel. Picking up Rachel, I glanced back to see the leader tearing off his mask, screaming and begging for whatever force was harming him to stop. My eyes widened in terror as the boy began to tear out his eyeballs, screaming and begging for forgiveness. The other kids had run at this point. I could see their bikes riding off in the distance. I heard the disgusting sound of his eyes being torn out, blood pouring from the now empty holes. The bullish kid fell to the ground unconscious, and perhaps even dead. I ran as fast as I could, carrying Rachel, who was crying and whimpering the whole way. I thought that I could keep going. I would lose the image that was still fresh in my head. Then, Rachel began to scream. At first, it was just loud whimpering, but it advanced to the same octave as the kid from before. She screamed loudly. The only word she could utter was either mommy or my name. I was scared. I looked at her eyes to see what she was looking at, but it was not needed because she began pointing in the direction we were fleeing from. I turned quickly, expecting to see the eyeless bully following me. What I saw was the mirror boy from the costume store. He advanced slowly, almost shuffling towards us. The mirror seemed to be tainted, blotched blood spots around it. He was dragging something, but I couldn't take my gaze away from his mask yet again. I saw it then, what was making Rachel scream undoubtedly. Looking into the boy's mask instead of seeing my face reflecting back at me, I saw the face of Rachel. However, it was not the Rachel I knew. His face was horribly disfigured. Parts of her flesh were torn off, others hanging. Her eyes. God, her eyes. They were hanging out of her sockets, bleeding thick, blotchy blood. Her mouth was agape, tongue waggling out as if it were a baby's rattle being tossed about. Her hair was matted and fried. Some of it was falling out to show off balding areas in her head. I gagged, holding in whatever would come out from seeing such a horrific sight. The disfigured face was advancing towards us with great haste. I started to scream, unable to move, holding onto what was the real Rachel, who was crying into my shoulder. The boy, no, the thing was advancing towards us, shuffling in his tracks. I ran again, only to trip and fall, holding Rachel tightly in my chest. The boy finally shuffled into my gaze, the mirror glittering against the moonlight. I winced, ready for the worst, holding Rachel tightly. Nothing had happened for a long time, and then I opened my eyes again to see what the boy was doing. I blinked to see a black glove holding a pretty tiara towards my face. The mask was no longer the horrifying image of Rachel, but instead was my teary face staring back. The boy held the tiara towards me, not speaking, not moving, and only tilted his head as if to wonder why I was taking so long. My shaking hand gripped the tiara as I pulled it out of his grip. He nodded at me and began to shuffle away from us, dragging something in his hand. At first, I was bewildered by what just happened, and I turned to look at Rachel, who had cried herself asleep to escape the nightmares that were alive that night. I turned back to face the boy, and I then noticed what he was dragging with him and almost gagged again. In his hand was the barbed wire and distorted face of the bully. Its eyes were gouged out, and the only thing that was different from the mask was how lifelike the dismembered head was. I took Rachel home that night, ignoring my mom's welcome homes and questions about why Rachel was sleeping and why I looked so pale. I tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and wished her a good night's sleep. I dragged myself to the restroom to piss away what wasn't already on my pants. Upon entering, though, I screamed louder than I ever could have done before. I saw him, gazing at me expressionless in the mirror. He was holding Rachel's head, the horribly disfigured one, and with a bloodied glove he began to write me a message on my mirror. I read carefully and was terrified to read the message. "Sweet dreams, princess." I broke off the towel rack and slammed it into my mirror, breaking it into many different shards. I blacked out, only hearing my mom's worried shrieks before I drifted into sleep. I can't look at mirrors anymore. I am always reminded of that horrifying image that keeps coming back in my head. I keep seeing the boy, holding a different head each time. Sometimes it's Rachel, other times my mother. Once I saw the face of my girlfriend, a year before I met her. The doctor calls it spectrophobia, the fear of mirrors. But I know that is not what it was. I know because every Halloween night, I receive a package with a hand mirror and a tiara taped onto it.
What is dead must stay buried. What is freshly dead must be carried to the grave and down the hole, where judgment begins on its soul. If this ritual is obscured, what comes of it cannot be cured. Its flesh will rot upon the ground, and all that will be heard is a high-pitched sound. It will be reborn as a creature, called by some the Midnight Shrieker. This thing will wander across your plains, driving sane men to become insane. Your women will weep without a care, and soon their eyes will be gone, along with their hair. Your cats and dogs will growl and hiss, as your children drown in their own piss. Your trees will burn, along with your house, while you play cat and mouse. With this creature of the night, you shall run with anger, panic, and fright. There are only 3 other ways to prevent this plague, besides putting them in a grave. Burn their body and it will be done. Just don't do it under the sun. Or you shall be cursed along with your kin for this dastardly and evil sin. Or let the corpse rot out of sight. The second way to escape this fright. As long as it's tied to something, you will be fine. Just don't let it go at any time. The third way, despite its pleas, is to bury the corpse out at sea. The fish will eat its eyes and brain, so it won't hurt anyone again. Now, my children, don't be afraid of what was said, as long as you bury your dead. But if you don't, you should be stirred, because what's to come cannot be cured.
Ah, Miss Smith, I presume? Welcome, welcome. Please take a seat. You look stunning. What is that sweet aroma I smell, Lemon glace? Vanilla quartz? Oh, just soap, you say? Regardless, it suits you to a T. We are overjoyed to have you here with us tonight. I believe we met over the, Job Finders website, correct? Yes, that site is a little backstreet compared to our establishment here, but alas, it is patrons without professions that we find we can cater to the most. I have what I understand to be your account here on the computer. Kitten Lover 2004, correct? Wonderful. I see you are wearing the same shade of lipstick as in your profile picture. How exciting. Come now, there is no need for embarrassment. That chair is composed of the finest leather this hemisphere of the world has to offer. Please do not tarnish it with your squirming. I kid, of course. Squirm to your heart's content. Now, we need only a few things before you can begin. Being one of our younger participants, you'll be entitled to more compensation, as I'm sure you're glad to hear. Sorry, what was that? Where are the other employees? Well, it's a late night and they've all gone home, so just me here tonight, I'm afraid. The majority of our facilities are fully autonomous, but we only ever require a light staffing at any given time. Which is a good thing, of course. Plenty of free space and empty rooms. You're going to need to sign this document. See, here? We need your full name and date of birth in that little box. Now, I understand the breadth of pages may, at first glance, be a little intimidating, but we will certainly be able to assist you in going over the smaller details of the contract, such as, oh, you've already signed it. You brought your own pen, huh? Good. I like your enthusiasm, dear. Please, follow me. You're almost ready to begin. Those glamorous high heels of yours certainly make their presence known down these corridors, don't they, sweetheart? All that clacking and echoing. And that velvet dress, it shines beautifully against these bleached white walls. I must say, you are by far one of our best dressed patrons. You clearly wish to make an impression. Smart move. First impressions are the best impressions, I always say. Sometimes the only impressions, come to think of it. Please ignore any unsavory noises coming from any of the passing hallways. We have a collection of animals awaiting transfer, and despite our best efforts to make them as comfortable as possible, they seem quite unhappy. I have suggested to my superiors that we may need to improve their state of living somewhat, but alas, my words seem to fall on deaf ears. Thankfully, they will not be remaining here for long. It's quite remarkable how much a simple parrot or crow can sound just like a person, no? Just around the corner now. Ah yes, here it is, room 201. No, wait, 102, my mistake. My vision must be failing me, haha. In we go then. This room holds a wonderful atmosphere, don't you think? That shade of blue on the walls has been scientifically calculated by our very own staff to reduce stress by as much as 15%. 15%! Oh, the miracles of modern science, eh, Miss Smith? Whenever you're ready, please take a seat on the chair in the center of the room. The stain beneath it? Merely a result of faulty piping. We are having it looked at by a professional soon. You can place those high heels of yours into the cabinet on the wall if you're concerned about getting them dirty. Perfect. Are you sitting comfortably? I must admit, that chair you were seated on back in the reception looked a little more elegant. No matter, the procedure will last a matter of minutes anyway. Why, I'm not entirely certain what you mean, Miss Smith. We talked about the procedure over the web, did we not? One small procedure, and then you can begin your stay here. It's customary for all our new participants. You didn't just expect a full-time job on the spot, did you? Not to cause offense, but that seems awfully naive of you. I see you're sweating a little. Here, take my handkerchief. You wouldn't want to ruin that gorgeous makeup of yours. Goodness, those locks didn't catch your fingers, did they? They can be awfully frightful when they activate automatically like that. And your ankles, they are fine too, yes? Wonderful. Oh, come now. Don't struggle. You might break something, and I'm not referring to the machine behind your head. Frankly, Miss Smith, I don't exactly see what all this fussing is about. Up to now, you were all smiles and roses. And just as the procedure is about to begin, you wish to leave? I'm afraid I can't allow that, dear. It's out of my hands at this point. Company policy dictates that once the standard legal contract has been signed, participation is mandatory. Allowing you to leave now would compromise my job, and by extension, my career. You wouldn't want me to get fired now, would you, Miss Smith? Come now, Miss Smith, that's a very rude thing to say about a person. Minutes ago, you were a lady of proper manners. I'll have no more of this pointless delaying. Hold still and stare into the sky above you. You do see a sky, don't you? Ah, the look on your face tells me everything I need to know. Perfect. The first stage has already begun. What the extractor is, Miss Smith, is none of your business. For the last time, you signed a contract. We are operating completely within our own right, regardless of however much pain you claim to be experiencing. I mean, for Pete's sake, it was written right there on paper. Didn't anyone ever tell you to read a contract before signing it, dear? You promised you'd give us the best years of your life, remember? Now, try to relax. If these readings are correct, you should have already lost feeling from the neck down.
I dreamed, and it was out there, but dreams are so incoherent. Tonight I dreamt about killing somebody, and it was just the worst. Like, man, I've never even thought about it. All day, death completely left my mind, and then I was reminded, and then I decided to write this all over again. To die dreaming is one thing, but to die in somebody's dream is another. Mother Teresa of Calcutta has appeared in my dream only once, and it was the most awful experience I probably had while dreaming. She was young, and in the nude. I've seen her through a window of some sort, distorting the view like a weird surrealistic painting. I was filled with lust. She was surrounded by many other women. They were all laughing, talking, constantly changing all their clothes, exchanging them with each other. Then they started exchanging limbs. Arms, legs, and heads were constantly changing at high speed, rolling around in this mess, each second getting more soft, more perfect, hair like wigs, faces like dolls, and bodies like mannequins, completely hairless, incredibly soft legs, back, breast, and buttocks floating around the room to form characters for mere seconds. It was a roller coaster of emotions, lust, fear, and disgust. It was the strongest sensation I've ever dreamed of. I couldn't look away. It didn't take much time before this voyeuristic spectacle ended, however. Everything quickly got progressively darker very fast, and I saw a black screen. Darkness. Nothing. And then I saw her again. In a field hospital, sitting a few empty beds away, looking in another direction. Darkness, once again. Then I saw her in the same hospital, exactly one bed closer to me, looking at me, piercing me with a look I can only compare to one of the artworks used for the Court of the Crimson King. Just this dumb, infuriating stare that I could not decipher. I did not know how to feel. I felt bad. I felt scared. Like I just saw a video I wasn't supposed to be seeing. It was not the first time, and it won't be the last time. So many of my dreams felt like I was watching a video. A dream tape constructed just for my brain to play it once and never again. One time it even felt like the tape was corrupted. Or just really badly compressed. I don't know. I'm not good with VHS or any of that stuff. What I do know is that it was basically black and white with very little details. Everything was very grainy and looked like one of those experimental horror movies. Merhijah's Begotten comes to mind. I couldn't make out much of it. Neither do I remember it in full. However, I clearly remember two different settings. First one was very short. It presented what looked like the inside of a helicopter, which was populated by strange humanoid creatures. They were almost identical in shape, very round and bulbous. This one also featured some colors that seemed to bleed through the weird effect, and the overall grayness it created. It was very noisy. All I could hear was some weird circus-like music, reminiscent of the Block World theme from the game Yumi Nikki, ironically based around dreams. The weird noises those creatures made and the looming sound of the turbine. It ended with all of them jumping off the aircraft one by one. Then the tape stopped. The second video was very hard to make sense out of. It looked like a pier in the middle of the ocean. On that platform I managed to make out a man laying on his back, possibly shirtless. He had what looked to be long straight hair. At some point I noticed someone crawling onto the structure. It looked like a woman, possibly a mermaid or some other fantastic creature. She was getting closer to the man, and when she got there, she laid on his legs for a while, doing what looked like oral sex. I was watching all of it from a bird's eye view, and the footage was distorted, so I cannot tell for sure. But it went on for a while, and the whole film was very quiet. There was little to no sound, just white noise and muffled sounds of the sea. Then as soon as the tape stopped, I woke up. Why is all that? Why are those dreams so strange? There was no reason for me to see these things, and yet they make dreaming such an interesting and terrifying sensation. All of those recordings from beyond the sleeping wall. Why won't you just take me then? I thought I understood something, but then I wake up, and I have all of this on my mind. It all felt wrong. It's hard to forget, too. Once I close my eyes, once my thoughts slip away, something very weird starts happening, and I never know how to feel about this. Like it's not my own mind projecting those images. I haven't thought about Mother Teresa in years. I've never been to a pier in my life. Neither did I watch any strange tapes before this. I was way too scared. Why does the wall break? Every time it breaks, and I'm not born again. That's the problem. Sometimes I feel like I'm there, but when I'm watching those tapes, where am I? This sleeping village was just on tape, and my prophecy was wrong. I am so lost. I thought I was in someone else's mind. But not only was this a failure, I've let someone get into my mind. I've let something get into my mind. I've let this strange obsession occupy it. And I can't just drop it. I can't look away. I can't stop watching. Connor used to reside in a small town near a lake. Each year on the night before Halloween, Connor and his friends Corey and Ryan would each place a pumpkin in the lake. On Halloween, they would travel to the other side of the lake to see if their pumpkins had arrived. On a cold October night, Connor had gathered his friends at the lake. They each carefully set their pumpkins in the dark water. The boys knew that they should head home. There had recently been a kidnapping after all. Connor and Ryan started to walk back, but something caught Corey's eye. He informed the others that he thought he saw something behind a tree that was only a handful of yards away. That tree lies in front of a thick forest, letting anything that used to lurk behind it hastily escape view. Early in the afternoon, Connor and his friends were at the lake, eager to start the long trek to the other side. There had been a brief downpour the previous night, hence the ordinarily bare dirt path had shifted into a damp mud. As the boys were walking, Ryan pointed out what looked to be light footprints traveling down the trail. However, Connor and Corey didn't think much of it. As they continued down the path, they spotted the lake. The boys ran towards it in anticipation. When they stepped foot on the small patch of grass that borders the lake, Connor noticed something. His pumpkin, an average-sized pumpkin with a stem that curled and ended in a point, rested on the grass. Ryan's pumpkin was on the shore about a yard away. Corey's pumpkin, however, was nowhere to be found. When Connor was at his house, he started to carve at the pumpkin. However, something was wrong. The pumpkin had a small slip near the top. When Connor finished carving to the top of the pumpkin, he noticed a small bag inside. The bag contained a note that read, "Have a jolly Halloween." Connor was visibly perplexed by the note.
Why did someone put this in my pumpkin?
Connor thought aloud. Connor decided aloud that it might have been in there before he even bought the pumpkin. The slit was hardly visible, so he could have overlooked it. That night, Connor and his friends were ecstatic to go trick-or-treating. They walked around the neighborhood for about an hour before coming to a halt at a certain house. Corey stopped the others and pointed out what he thought was the pumpkin that he released into the water on the previous night. Connor and Ryan both informed him that the pumpkin just looked similar and was not in fact his. 1 hour later, Connor and his friends were at his house comparing how much candy they had each received. Connor was going through his candy when he felt a small piece of paper. The paper read, "I hope you had a jolly Halloween." Connor gasped in shock. He quickly informed his friends about the note he had found earlier in the day and asked them if they had a similar note among their candy. Ryan and Corey carefully searched through their candy to no avail. Now, Connor was scared. He started to question everything in the past couple of days. Ryan informed him that it must be a coincidence, and maybe they were all just overthinking it. Connor liked that idea. He put his candy away and said goodbye to his friends. The next day, Connor had no school, but his parents had to work, so he was alone. After a while, he got hungry, so he reached into the jar that housed his candy. He felt a strange object, so he pulled it out. In his hand was a square candy with a red wrapper sealing it shut. One side of the wrapper was slightly transparent. Connor unwrapped the candy only to find a box. The box had a small camera lens on the side, and the top read, "Soon, you won't be jolly." Connor stumbled backward and ran outside in a panic. Connor's backyard is right next to a dense forest, so he tried to flee. But I rushed to him and grasped him. The boy struggling stopped after some time, and I was easily able to drag him into the forest. He won't be jolly for a long time.
The nurse gently lays me back on the surgical bed. The paper covering rustles slightly and brushes uncomfortably against the exposed skin of my arms and thighs. I shift a little in an attempt to make myself more comfortable. My face must clearly be reflecting how much my stomach is churning for the procedure ahead as the nurse asks if I need a bag. I take a deep breath to try and steady my nerves. The odd scent of various chemicals and cleaning solvents doesn't help, but I still decline her offer. She nods and places the rubbery, transparent mask over my nose and mouth. There's a soft hiss as the gas flows through the tubes and invades my lungs. The nurse counts down from 10. My mind blacks out before she reaches 5. Awareness slowly returns to me as I lay on the bed. That hadn't been too bad, I muse idly. My head feels heavy, and as I see no reason to move yet, I let myself remain still in the relative silence of the recovery room. The door to the room opens and several people come walking into the room. A brief draft brushes over my arms before it closes. The nurses, most likely, come to check on my status. I open my eyes to show I am awake. My eyelids refuse to obey. Concern begins to wash over me, and I try to open my mouth to call them. When my jaws remain locked together, I try to move my limbs. Panic sets in with full force now as the individuals take up position around my bed. A voice that I recognize as the one belonging to the surgeon speaks up. "If everybody is ready, let us proceed with the operation." The mind. The hollow void of your skull and electricity that keeps you alive, based on ever-changing but firm instincts. The very mass that is you. Your consciousness, all in one small fragile pack of tissue. But as we know, electricity can be manipulated. You can be manipulated. Everything you know, say, think, and do is all electricity. Like an overgrowing photography collection, everything passes through the brain to be confirmed, and then remembered. As an old saying goes, you forget 1,000 things every day. So if the brain was such a good firewall, why would you still see shapes in the middle of the night, eerie noises haunting you, only to be confirmed as something else? Well, it is simple. Why are humans afraid of snakes, storms, and war? We learned our lesson. We found that these things kill us, and we should stay far away from any source of these events. So, as for these shapes, we learned our lesson. We found that these things can also kill us, just as the previous threats. What phobia is pulling the threads, telling your brain to be weary of something you are told you are making up? All the studies, all the facts, and yet you still fear your midnight hallucinations. It is less simple than many would like to prove, but can be summed up with one word: coexistence. Just because humans forgot these beings exist does not mean they have not slaughtered us in the past. And they certainly have not gone away. These stealthy beasts have taken kids who were declared missing. They look like anything they can copy. That is why human shapes and beast-like shapes both appear. You forget 1,000 things every day. Don't forget again. It feels like I've been driving forever, my headlights illuminating the stretch of road that lays before me. I'm surrounded by nothing but trees and whatever lies beyond them. It's times like these that make you reflect. I tend to never reflect on anything until today. Until this night.
I feel the urge to reflect on choices. It's crazy how everything we do, every minimal choice we make can affect our lives on a grand or minuscule scale. The result is life or death, the loss of a loved one, the reward of riches, even suicide. Choices. People like me never think about repercussions of choice. We just do. The hours are getting to me. 9 hours on this same stretch of road with no other car in sight. No stops or turns. Just road and woods. My choices got me here. The wrong turn, maybe? The wrong decision, most definitely. Why are the worst decisions the most satisfying? This car was one of those. This car. God, how I love this car so much. The very first time I saw it, I knew that I would make a bad choice. My worst human flaw is that I tend to fall in love with things that don't belong to me, and this was one of them. Unfortunately, someone owning something never stopped me from making the choice to have what I want. In turn, making the choice to take this car led me to flee the town, which led me to this road. I was told by a friend about a road that I could take to avoid the police. He said it would only take me about 3 hours to get into the next town. After 4 hours, I decided to turn around and come back, but it's been over 5 and nothing has changed. I should have reached the town hours ago. You would think the car would have ran out of gas already, but it doesn't even have a gas meter. Could it be electric? But wouldn't it still have to charge? I'm terrified, but I love this car. It has an old-fashioned radio that oddly has only one station that plays the same song over and over again. Every 6 songs, a radio DJ, whose voice could be described as a cross between Lurch and Alfred, will come in and say a list of random names before replaying the song again. The names are different every time. There's no way to turn it off, but I love this car. I tune out the decrepit sounds. I can't stop. I can't brake, turn the wheel, shift gears, open the doors. Nothing. It's as if this car is alive and it doesn't want me to leave. Like it doesn't want me to leave this road. It must love me, like I love it. Choices. Hours pass like seconds. I can tell now that I'll be here forever. Crazy thing about choices. The smallest choice can have the grandest impact on one's life. The choice to take this car was just that. An eternity within it. An eternity on the same road listening to the same song. Are the names the DJ announces people that were in the same situation? Their unknown faces are my companions now. Am I dead already? Is this purgatory or my own personal hell? Things that I'll reflect on forever. Even though it has been a long time on this road, I am still terrified. You see, I have lost track of time, but have begun to notice the car getting slower every few hours. The thought of the car I love so much finally stopping after all this time should have filled me with relief, but when I mentioned being surrounded by trees and whatever lies beyond them, I meant whatever the things were that hid behind them. I thought them to be typical deer or other woodland animals, but noticed more and more of them ever since the car started slowing down. They're deathly frail with pointed ears and teeth. Their eyes are like black pits with flashlight bulbs for irises. They look menacing and anxious, as if they knew that in time the car would stop and they'd have me. I know they will. They'll devour my flesh before they devour my soul. It will be extremely slow and excruciatingly painful. Crazy thing is, despite all the terrible things that have come from my bad choices, I still love this car, and it's about to stop. The following is a written confession obtained by the FBI, which have been leaked to the public. Reader discretion is advised. Our mission, to give young people a chance to experience adulthood. Man, they almost make it sound noble. That's what I thought as I scrolled through the About section of IDLord.com, a site based in China, I believe, that sold fake IDs like hotcakes. It was surreal looking at something like this. Some site that sells phony driver's license to kids with inspiring sales copy. I was 18 at this time, and 4 of my friends and I wanted to get one of those group deals on fakes. $60 per person, something like that. If you went solo, it was north of 100, and since all of us were on board, we thought, what the hell? After doing some research on some shady sites on how to best concoct the info on your fake, I was ready to place my order. Step 1. Use your real first name but a fake last name. This means that a bouncer won't toss you to the curb after your friends have been calling you Jake the whole time in line, even though the name on your ID says Fabio or some shit. The fake last name. Well, come on, no need to explain the reasons for that. My real name is Jake Dalton, so I use the name Jake Norman on my fake ID. Step 2. Use the age 21. Though it's generic, it's a common age, and there are lots of people who are, in fact, 21. No need to stretch your age. Step 3. Your picture. Make sure there's even lighting. I actually once knew a guy who got busted because on his ID photo, half his face was covered in shadow. He had no idea. And why would he? He was a stupid 16-year-old. Step 4. The signature. Just make it look like you're not in kindergarten. Oh, and make sure it's the fake name you came up with, not your real name. Step 5. The address. This trips some people up. Some people make up a completely fake address, but then they don't remember it when a suspicious bouncer asks them. Instead, use your actual house number so you can remember it, then make the street a fake one and change the state to whichever state your ID says. Okay, easy enough. So I got my fake in the mail, checking the mailbox profusely over the next couple of weeks to make sure my parents didn't intercept my package, and it looked great. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and my fake ID was a Tennessee driver's license, the state which borders mine. I live at 308 so the address on my ID was a place in Tennessee code 308 Easy to remember. My friends and I, or should I say Jake Norman, had a blast that Friday night. We got past bouncers, we bought cases of beer, we got into bars and did shots with our cash tips we'd gotten at work. It was great. My friend Sammy and I were chilling out the following day, Saturday afternoon. We were sort of hungover and a bit bored, just watching stuff on YouTube and reading stuff on forums. As we go through 4chan, we come to find that there is a thread for ID Lord, the site we got our fakes from. We decided to click on it, see how other folks made out with their fake ID experiences. There were little minor complaints. The UV is a little high, or the signature looks stretched. There were glowing reviews too. And then we came across something that was a bit odd. There was a subthread which was titled, "The address I made up for my ID is a real address?" Anyone else notice this? What followed were a half dozen comments claiming the same thing. Naturally, Sammy and I went and looked up the address I had made up. There it was on Google Maps, 308 White Brook Lane, and in Tennessee no less. We thought maybe ID Lord used real addresses for realism, but surely that'd be illegal. I'm no law student, but that seemed like a form of impersonation. But there was one thing that really caught our attention. A few of the commenters claimed the houses had money stashed in the floorboards, lots of it. People came up with these theories as to why this might be. The most convincing was that maybe the houses were drug houses used by the same cartel that sold the fake IDs. Well, being broke high schoolers, Sammy and I were soon en route to the address, which was only a few hours from my house. It was sunset by the time we arrived. The house was a 2-story home in the hood, and it had a chain-link fence surrounding the property. A large oak tree stood in the backyard, looming over the house as if protecting it. Beyond that were some woods that stretched on into the next neighborhood over. Sammy and I got out of the car and headed for the property. The chain-link gate creaked as we opened it and stepped through. We walked across the overgrown, dandelion-filled grass and went up the doorsteps and opened the screen door and knocked. No answer. We knocked several more times and still no answer. "Dude," said Sammy, "let's fucking go in and look for the money." "Hell yeah," I replied. We went inside. The place had furniture in it, and it seemed as though someone was still living there. But everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, and we were never more than 3 feet from a cobweb, so we were fairly certain the house hadn't been lived in. Still, we had our doubts. "I don't know, man," I said. "We might be trespassing." "Look," said Sammy, "I ain't passing up on a boatload of money. Let's tear this place up, fight it, and get out of here. No one's lived here for years. Look." Sammy ran his finger across the mantel, displaying the wad of dust that had snowballed onto his fingertip. "See?" he said. Yeah, I replied. "Alright, let's get to it." We tore the place up, threw up couch cushions, rummaged through drawers, peeled away molding, put holes in the walls. It was dark now, and we were about ready to give up and just go home. That's when we heard something. It sounded like a television. "Shit, dude," I said. "Is that a damn TV?" Sam and I stared at each other with our jaws agape. Our shocked open mouths were pits of darkness. Our eyes were bug's eyes. The sound of the TV was coming from upstairs. You think someone just left it on? Sammy asked stupidly. Oh my god, dude, I sighed. We're fucked. Probably some old person who can't hear a thing. Only one way to find out. Sammy and I crept up the stairs. Each step creaked, and each time it did, we winched like we'd been pinched. Whatever was playing on the TV was a commercial, but I was pretty sure it was a super long infomercial, because it sounded like the same voice had been talking for the past few minutes. We got to the top step and I, at the forefront, peeked around the corner and gazed down the dark hallway. The hall stretched for about 20 feet and there was a door at the end. Blue light flickered beyond it. The TV, I presume? I whispered. Sam and I crept down the hall. Excuse me? I called. Sammy shushed me and slapped my shoulder as his eyes went wide. The hell are you doing? He hissed. We're really sorry for being here, I said, ignoring Sammy. We thought the place was empty. We got the wrong house and... My voice drifted off as we listened for a response. Nothing. We arrived at the end of the hall and pushed the door open. The room was empty, but it was what played on the TV that was truly haunting. The TV was an OxyClean type infomercial, some guy shouting at the camera in an excited way. At ID Lord, we value you, the salesman shouted. You get to create a new you that is of legal age. A you that gets to party with the adults, get into clubs, order a beer at your favorite bar. Get together for a group purchase and get 50% off your... Sammy and I looked at one another with big eyeballs. What the fuck? I asked. Let's go, said Sammy. This is... We turned around and there he stood. Or should I say, there I stood. It was me. Even in the shadows, I could see that it was me that stood across from us. Either I had a twin, or something had occurred that was beyond my comprehension. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. I went into a state of paralysis by fear. Me, the other me, wore the same clothes I'd been wearing in my fake ID photo. The hair? That was the same too. Something else matched too. The facial expression. When I had gotten my photo taken, I just gave a little half smile. And that was the expression the other me had plastered to his face, unmoving, unblinking. Not even a twitch. Who are you? I said. Still holding the same facial expression, the other me spoke. You know who I am. You're me. No. You're Jake Dalton. Yeah? I'm Jake Norman. I was going to pay you a visit tonight. It looks like you came to me. Before Sammy and I could do a thing, Jake Norman lunged for Sammy. My evil clone pounced on him like a tiger and bit into his neck. My God, the gargling noise that erupted from Sammy's throat, the mix of screaming and bubbling blood. Sammy, I shouted. I tried to pull Jake Norman off him, but the clone was firm as a statue, and pulling on him was like trying to uproot one from the ground. I backed away and got ready to run, just as Jake Norman lifted his blood-stained head and glared at me. I shrieked and booked it towards the stairs. I glanced over my shoulder just in time to see the other me roll onto his back, prop himself up, proceed to spider walk after me. I flew down the stairs, then me to that freaky spider walk down the steps, faster than any human could go in that position. I yanked open the door, ran to my car, and hopped in. As I put the keys in the ignition, Jake Norman slammed his face up against the window and pressed it to the glass, hissing as he ran his tongue along the glass. I started up the car and sped away. I went to the police immediately. I told the cops to go to the house and they'd find his body. When they did, they found nothing. Not even a blood stain. I was suspected for Sammy's disappearance. I was eventually exonerated, but everyone still looks at me like I did it. I know what everyone is thinking. They think I'm a murderer. I think I'm going to have to move, probably to another state. But those are the least of my worries. Jake Norman is still out there, and by God, he's coming for me. I know sooner or later he'll come looking, and he'll find me. Fact is, I would have been better off in prison.
Dave woke up with a start, rubbing his grime-covered eyes. He stumbled to get up off of his sofa as he tried to locate the faint ringing noise that had taken him out of his drunken slumber. He remembered very little about the night before. He only seemed to remember the blaring music of the party he had thrown to celebrate his graduating from college. The stench of vomit and cheap beer filled the air of his dingy townhouse. As Dave stumbled drunkenly around his trashed living room, he noticed that the ringing he heard earlier had stopped. Finally, he realized that the ringing had been emanating from his phone, which had been buried underneath the red Solo cups that had been filled with spiked punch the night before. He picked up his phone and noticed the 4 voicemails left by his girlfriend and fellow graduate, Adriana. He placed his phone to his ear to listen to the messages, his head throbbing like it was being crushed in a vice. First unheard message, recited a robotic voice.
Hey, that was a great party Jeff threw for you, am I right? I just wanted you to know that I made it home in one piece. It seemed you had way more fun than I did last night, considering you were passed out on the couch when I left with Bree. I'm going to bed now, so call me back later tomorrow. I love you so much, Dave. Bye!
Memories of the night before started to flood back into his mind. He vaguely remembered his girlfriend leaving at around 1:15, 20 minutes before the first message. He walked over to the bathroom to grab some aspirin as the robotic voice announced the next message.
Hey Dave, is that you outside my house? If it is, it's not funny. You know how easily I get scared. If it's you, just move something. Don't just stand there.
As he sat back on the couch, he thought about the strangeness of that last message. Her house was way too far for anyone in a drunken state to drive to, let alone walk. Dave lived about 15 minutes from campus, and Adriana lived with her cousin Bree about 40 minutes from campus, which made it impossible for someone who was in the state Dave was in to get to her place. He hesitantly continued on with her messages.
Oh my god, I really don't think it's you. Holy hell, what is that? Dave, I really hope that isn't you. Whatever's outside my window just turned towards me. Please, Dave, call back. It has a mask, Dave. Before, when I thought it was you, it was facing the street, but now it's halfway up my lawn and it's looking straight at me. It's wearing a mask, Dave. Please call back. I need help.
The shattered words of his girlfriend echoed through his head. The thought of anything happening to Adriana scared him out of his mind. He realized that the next and final message was the call that had woken him up just a few minutes ago. Final unheard message, the emotionless voice announced the next phone call.
Dave, I'm in the closet and I've called the police. It's been 30 minutes since I last called, and in that time, that thing made it to the door. Damn it! It's in the house, Dave! I can hear it in the house and the police aren't even here yet. I love you so much. Please know that in case I don't make it.
At this point in the message, tears of horror made their way down Dave's face.
I can hear it in the room. It's just outside the...
Dave couldn't believe what he had just heard. As tears streamed down his face, he noticed someone was standing at the end of his driveway, facing the street.
I worried about him sometimes, constantly bumping into walls, scraping off the scabs that covered his knees and staining the denim fabric of his pants an ugly shade of maroon. I worried about the purple-stained bags under his eyes. Despite the beds we often came across, I'd never seen my trainer sleep. Humans need sleep, right? I worried about the fossil, too. It had a pretty spiraling shape. Pretty, but not pretty enough for Red to have reason to stare at it constantly and run his fingers over the contours of it with a crazed, obsessive look in the deep scarlet eyes he was named for. Even though it was just a rock, he looked at it with so much fiery hot passion and intensity. Maybe it was because he was troubled, as the whispers of those who thought they were out of earshot put it. He heard voices in his head, millions of horrible, awful voices, Charmeleon said with a tinge of pity in her voice. Maybe that was why I had to fret about him like this. I worried about him during our fateful trip to the Pokemart. He was stuffing Pokédolls into his bag at an alarming rate, depleting his wallet almost completely before he managed to buy what we'd come here for, a stone that would allow me to evolve. As far as I've been told by the senior Mons of the party, the plan was to buy a water stone enabling me to become a sleek and graceful Vaporeon with the ability to cross water. I wouldn't have minded that, but the Fates seemed to have different ideas. Red snatched up a firestone and hastily, jerkily pushed a wad of bills over the counter before ambling out of the shop, wincing at some loud noise only he could hear. I wondered why he'd bought the wrong stone as the rest of the team whispered worriedly among themselves. Maybe it was because he was troubled. I never really thought about the stone as we continued our erratic journey. Red was rifling through the pockets of his backpack in no particular order again. Maybe he did it to make sure everything was there. Suddenly the firestone was in his hand. He considered the item for a moment before his facial features softened for a moment. He got down on his knees to be on my level, and I returned his eye contact. "Evie?" he whispered, his voice harsh and crackly from disuse. "Be my flame. Be the light that can guide us through this asinine adventure." What? What about Vaporeon? What about surfing together, leaping through this white sea foam with Red in tow? But it would make him smile, even for a moment. I tentatively reached out my paw to contact the translucent orange stone, and I felt the light of evolution wash over me. Heat, power, majesty flowed through my system, unable to be contained and bursting out into an impressive wispy mane and dyeing my fur a noble crimson. Even I could hear the screams in Red's head at that point. He gritted his teeth, futilely jamming his hands over his ears, arcing his back in pain, screaming to drown it out. My evolution didn't make him smile. I made him cry. I failed. I failed as a partner. I failed as a friend.
Oh, that's too bad. He'll have to replace you. What? Who said that? But
they were right. My chest felt constricted, and my heart beat so fast like it was trying to escape. I was going to stay with Red, whether anyone liked it or not, I thought, noticing Charmeleon's glare. That night, paranoia seized me like a huge clawed hand, digging through my skin and into my lungs. Would Red really replace me? The disdainful glances I caught Rattata shooting in my direction told me yes, he would. I couldn't stand that. Despite his affliction, Red loved me. He said himself. I would be his guiding light, his flame. We would be champions together, no matter what. Well, you'll have to make sure you don't get booted from the team then, huh? That Lapras looks awfully promising. I choked down a sob. I had to make sure there was no reason for my trainer to consider using another Mon over me. It was me or them. Someone else would have to go. You've got your new powers now. It shouldn't be hard to eliminate a competitor. Unless you're weak. This voice was... it was sinister. It was trying to goad me on, but it was right. My knees were locking up with apprehension, but I was strong now. Charmeleon and Rattata were conversing quietly in the corner of the Pokemon Center, Charmeleon fidgeting with her tail, Rattata nervously grooming his whiskers. Red didn't need them anymore. He already had a fire type, the most fiercely loyal fire type in all the world. He had better than that Pokemon who spoke at him with doubt in her voice. I sprang forward and dug my teeth in Charmeleon's neck as a red haze overcame my vision, the voice chuckling in the back of my mind, the metallic taste of her blood in my mouth. I'd gotten lucky and hit a major artery. Rattata, who had been paralyzed by fear, sprinted off to get help as the flame-tailed lizard's blood decorated the tile floor. Haha, our base speed is higher. I easily caught Rattata, pinning his tail with a powerful paw as I spat up hot white embers into his prone form. They tingled in my throat, made pleasant sizzling sounds as they burned away flesh and fur. I did it. A laugh bubbled up from inside me as the haze started to dissipate. Red stumbled in, and his features soon contorted into an expression of abject horror, followed by grief. He slowly, oh so slowly, bent down to inspect Charmeleon's corpse. A tear fell from his eye, followed by another one, followed by a salty deluge. I killed them. I killed 2 innocent Pokemon. Red's head turned slowly towards me as I shrunk into myself, overcome by an immense wave of guilt. It was that voice's fault, not mine. You promised to love me unconditionally, Red. But the expression of sheer sorrow snapped me out of my twisted mindset. They didn't deserve to die. I promise, I'll make it up somehow. Red, hand shaking, recalled me into my Pokeball with a cry of anguish. We walked to the PC by Nurse Joy's counter, Red still cradling Charmeleon's lifeless form like some sort of doll. Once released, Flareon is gone forever. Release Flareon? Bye-bye, Flareon. The last thing I felt was my essence ebbing away on the digital tide.
Jenny Hannovers. That's what they were called. These stingrays that had been carved and dried looking so much more gruesome than I would have expected. They were being made for centuries, but I had never really heard of them. Apparently, they were used in the 16th century to trick people into believing that demons exist, and very effectively, may I add. When I finally found out about them, I immediately thought that I could use one to finally beat my dick of a neighbor in the Halloween decoration competition. Year after year, I would scour the web and buy the most disturbing, fucked up things that I could find in order to give me an edge. But he had money backing him. Because of that, I would consistently get second place. This time, I thought, this time Jared will pay. A sick grin grew on my face as I dropped a couple $100 on it without hesitation. Despite the price, I had a feeling that this would finally bring the results I was looking for. I fully admit that this behavior was a little bit obsessive for what would ordinarily be such a trivial matter, and, looking back, we could have saved ourselves a lot of grief by just shutting up and living with it.
However, over the course of several years, my rivalry with him grew into a hatred of his lavish lifestyle. My family and I had been living across the street from this buffoon for years. We had worked our asses off to live as comfortably as we did, and to watch some trust fund baby play loud music, constantly brag about his cars, and have different women at his house every night was just disgusting to us. All of us were bitter. Even my young daughter, who he had kept up at night with his loud music and fornication, which penetrated all of our soundproofing efforts. Previously, we even tried talking to the HOA about it, but you know how they are. He paid them extra, so they kept turning a blind eye to his obvious infractions. Just trust me, if you were in my shoes, I have a feeling you would understand the anger we all felt. I knew that if I could win just once, I could see the shock on his face. I could see him realize that not everything in the world is just given to people, and hard workers will prevail over arrogant, lazy slobs like him. That brings us to October 1st, 2019. This was the date the box arrived, and the date this whole mess started. After opening the box, my daughter, Olivia, was surprisingly less scared of it than my wife, Kate. Olivia was more fascinated by it than anything. The Jenny Hanover came with instructions to hang it up and some general upkeep tips. It was all pretty much what you would expect, but the last tip was apparently very important. The text, over twice as large and bolded, stated, "Do not place in water." I thought that this was to be expected. Drying was just a part of the preservation process. If it were to somehow rehydrate, it would probably start to smell like shit, and that would be a good $200 down the drain. I'm not completely sure why, but Olivia really loved this thing that she named Herbert. She would play with it like a doll and even sleep with it. Sometimes she asked to take a bath with it, but Kate and I told her that she shouldn't because it might ruin it. One day, she wanted to take Herbert to show and tell, which we allowed if she was careful with it. Apparently, all of the other kids in the class and the teacher ran out screaming, and she was sent home. Even though she got in trouble, I didn't mind. That day confirmed that Jenny Hanover would bring the exact reaction we wanted out of people. We continued the month as normal, and word began to spread around about such a terrifying object. Then came October 30th, the day before the contest. We didn't want to show our full hand before the competition, so we decided not to hang it up until Halloween. That being said, we were also afraid that Olivia would accidentally break it right before, so we hid it in a closet for the day. She was upset that she couldn't play with it, but she seemed to understand. Until the day ended, she finally started asking a lot of questions about it.
Dad, what is Herbert?
Herbert's a dried stingray, sweetie.
Where did you get him? Why are kids so scared of him?
I bought him online. He was supposed to be a Halloween decoration. We were actually really surprised that you weren't scared of him to begin with.
Why can't I put him in water?
He's dried and pretty old. He'll probably start to smell bad if we do that.
Why does he ask me to bring him in the tub then?
This question definitely threw me off a little. But, you know, kids and their imaginations, always running wild and creating friends with things like stuffed animals. I responded about as seriously as any parent would. Hahaha, maybe he'll come to life or something, I don't know. We all went to bed early that night because we knew we would be decorating the house all day on Halloween. Around midnight, I was awakened to a scream coming from the bathroom. As I rushed to the bathroom, I noticed the closet door was open, and I immediately thought I knew what happened. However, when I opened the door, the last thing I expected to see was that thing trying to pull my daughter into the water with its tail, which had become more like a tentacle. Kate, get the gun! The thing had kept its disgusting pale color, although now it was very slimy to the touch. I could tell that this was not just a disfigured stingray anymore, but something completely different. I attempted to rip that thing's tail away from my daughter, but it was unnaturally strong. It hissed at me and tried to bite me. When Kate arrived with the gun, I immediately shot the tail to free Olivia. Pushing her away from the thing, it thrashed about and let out a horrific screech as I unloaded the rest of my magazine into it. When it finally stopped moving, we took a moment to collect ourselves, and then thought of how we would get rid of it. It definitely smelled as bad as I thought it would. I decided that despite the horrible experience and the bullet holes in it, I would hang it up right away just to get it outside. If we had gone through this much with it, we might as well have gotten some use out of it. When I walked onto my porch, police officers arrived. They told me that neighbors had told them to look into some gunshots that came from my house. I held up the thing, smiling, and just said, "It's okay, officers, just a little monster in my house. You can come in if you'd like." One searched the place as the other watched me hang up the little eldritch horror beast that was my Jenny Hanover. Sir, what the hell is that thing? The officer asked with a hand on his taser. It's called a Jenny Hanover. It's just a disfigured stingray, really. Why the hell did you even buy that thing? I thought it would be a good Halloween decoration. The officer and I continued to talk while the other finished up his search. Of course, everyone was okay, not a little bit shaken. They left without any problems, but then we tried to go back to sleep. For obvious reasons, that wasn't working out for any of us, so we all gathered in the dining room table to talk about it while having some snacks. Hey, Olivia, was that thing actually talking to you?
It was. What kind of things did it say?
Asked Kate.
He wanted me to take a bath with him,
she croaked out as she began to cry. I threw up in my mouth. After excusing myself, I went to the bathroom. There, I splashed water on my face, pinched myself, slapped myself in the face repeatedly, and forced my eyes open and closed. I did everything I could to convince myself that this wasn't happening, while my wife was consoling Olivia. When I sat back down, my mind was still racing. I'm sorry for putting you all through this, I said.
It's okay, Dad. You couldn't have known.
I probably shouldn't have encouraged playing with a dead animal anyways.
Even though it was a little weird, I can see why you did, honey. She seemed like she was having a good time. Come on, Olivia, let's try to get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a big day,
replied Kate. Only then were we able to get some sleep. The next morning, the thing was gone. I didn't really know what to think about that, but good riddance, I guess. We didn't even feel like putting up decorations that day. The following year, we sold all of the Halloween decorations we had accumulated over the years so we could afford to move to a calmer place. Here, there was no Jared. Here, there was no possibility of that thing finding us. Here, we could live in peace. Sometimes, though, I still think back to the incident and wonder what the fuck happened to that thing.
Around mid-October, my television started to make a noise. Not all the time, just when it was set to a specific channel. The noise it made caught my attention. The channel appeared one day with some weird code in the corner. I figured it was a glitch due to it just being made available. Most of the time it was just static, and since my TV, being quite old, can hardly pick up the decent channels, it was no surprise to me that this new channel would cut in and out like it did. I don't have any sort of television provider. I use antenna. I had been meaning to get one for a long time. But I hardly watch TV anyway, and I didn't feel like paying the outlandish costs. In the beginning, the new channel didn't play anything I was familiar with. I couldn't make out most of the shows because the signal was sporadic, but when the waves made it through, it would show images of people. I think they were stills. I never saw them move. These people would be shown one at a time, standing in black space. I figured that whatever show was playing had to do with strange diseases. All of the people that were displayed had these grotesque-looking growths on them. Some looked like simple boils. Others, I guess the more developed stages, had their skin almost peeled back from their muscles. It would just be hanging there. I never caught a glimpse of any of the people's faces, but I assumed that they were just as bizarre looking as their bodies. The noise that the channel made is hard to describe. It was like when you had the volume on your speakers turned up too high, that background buzz. I'd check my volume whenever I flipped to it and it was fine, so I blamed the signal. When nothing good was on the few channels I can pick up, I flipped to the new one, and sure enough, the noise was there. Whatever the show was, it was interesting enough to wade through the static to try and make out what was happening. After a couple weeks, the people in the images started getting closer to the screen. They'd be more detailed, and they seemed to be decomposing further. They would lose more and more of their skin as they crept forward. After a while, it looked like they were coming towards me. They started to discolor. It was like the air was getting to them. The noise started getting louder as well, and began to cross over into the other channels I could pick up. So did the images. I thought it to be the fault of my television, so I stopped watching it for a while. Not too long after, out of curiosity, I flipped on my TV and turned to the channel. But it wasn't there. I went through the available channels 3 or 4 times, and it was nowhere to be found. The noise had stopped too. A few days ago, I woke up in the middle of the night. All I could hear was the noise. I went into my living room and, sure enough, my TV was on, and up in the corner was that code. The images, though, were right up against the screen like they were pressing on it. They were flickering between one another. I ran over and turned it off. I stood there for a while, making sure everything was okay. Eventually, I calmed down enough to go back to bed. The channel hasn't been on since. My TV is fine, all the old channels work. Lately, though, out of the corner of my eye, I can see the people. They're just as decayed as when they were on the screen. But one thing's different. They move now. I can hear the noise too, and it's getting louder.
Thousands of years ago, the world as we know it was covered in dark, foreboding forests. Within these ancient forests lurk strange and frightening monsters which would become the basis of most of the world's mythology, folklore, and fairy tales. Within the ancient forest hid man-eating beasts, vicious hags, and boogeymen of all shapes and sizes, all of which died long before the modern era. They exist only in the imagination of those who have kept the wisdom of their ancestors alive in song, dance, and written stories. Yet, every now and then, the ancient forests return, spiriting people away from their homes or work and trapping them within the twisting nether. These people are presumed missing by the world and rarely return, and even when they do, they are often without memory or means of identification. Within the ancient forest, these souls walk endlessly, pursued by the many dark forces that lurk within. There is no reason behind these events, no purpose, and no grand design. This, perhaps, is what is most frightening to the modern mind. The idea that even in our so-called age of reason, people can be taken away in the flash of an eye to a realm beyond our own, a realm which refuses to play by our limited notion of reality. You can never tell when it will occur or who will be taken next. It is as random as death itself. No search party could find you, no priest or holy man could pray for you. Friends and family would be powerless. This is no fairy tale, but the fate of hundreds every day. How, you may ask, do you protect yourself? The answer is simple. You don't. Live every moment of every day as if it were your last. Find happiness in the smallest of things, and do not be quick to anger, for this world is fleeting, and no one knows what awaits us when our time finally comes.
It felt like hours had gone by. Or maybe it was days, months, years. Really, it wasn't possible to measure time's subjective passing when its objective motion was frozen in place. The white Toyota had hung in midair forever, and for no time at all, wrapped in a cloud of ice and shattered safety glass that glistened white and pink above the frozen pine boughs off the overlook. Janet stared out the broken windshield. The car was canted to one side, towards Sophie in the passenger seat. She couldn't see her daughter except as peripheral, stalled movement, where her hair was a paused chestnut explosion and her hands weren't quite shielding her face. Inside, the other woman was screaming. Her soul cowered in some safe corner, trying to protect itself from the nightmare she now regretted asking to see. Of course, sound and cowering were motion, and motion was impossible in this little pocket of reality. Her body remained as it had been, one hand at 10 and the other hand gripping 2, all sitting in perfect quiet. More hours passed, more time without time. As soon as Janet's mind was able to step into more open spaces, she found the voice whispering to her again without words. "Have you decided yet?" Silence wasn't a yes. But Janice knew the thing understood that it also wasn't a no. It had just shown her. Well, hell wasn't quite the right word for it, but it was close enough. There was no hell, and there was no heaven. Only that ancient abyss that waited for either her or Sophie after the car was again set free to trace its inevitable arc to the forest floor, fully 80 feet below the roadway. An infinite gulf of fire that gave heat but no light. Stinking, burning, worm-bitten dark, where life and death lasted an eternity in a moment and stretched out across an endless expanse of years. Either or. There was a choice that wasn't really a choice laid out before her eyes. The voice knew human nature, and it understood the depths of fear and pain. It had been born from them, and it drank them like a thirsty man in the desert given a glass of cold water. A starving animal will eat its own child, or its own mother, despite the lies that Janet told herself, the nonsense reasons that she used to justify the request. She knew that she had asked to see the world that creature had warned her of in order to make an already determined course of action easier to take, to eat what had been set in front of her. But still, she hesitated. Hesitation wasn't deliberation. It was simply a delay of action, a potentially fatal delay, and maybe a suicidal one. A way to choose the humanly impossible by not choosing at all, to wordlessly select death, and in the selection, to be damned in her own child's place. Maybe. The memory faded, too intolerable to hold on to. First it was only the sharp and immediate sting that died away. Then the vision gradually became uncertain, swallowed up in that long forever. Had it really happened? Had such a thing been possible? No. Janet would have been sure of something like that. After she had rejected the thought, it was a small thing to forget the rejection as long ages passed without actually passing. Ahead of the car, a ribbon of sunlight marked the eastern horizon. The full light of day lay behind, a destination that the car moved always toward, but never could reach. The hungry voice lurked in the mind of its two stalled passengers, and while they decided who it should feed on, it ate its fill of both.
There are tons of stories out there about hacked Pokemon games. Some of them really quite neat, such as the one about a version where you get a ghost as a starter. Some are ridiculous, silly stories about individuals dying after playing a game, or the game talking to them. God, don't these writers know less is more when it comes to these stories? Ah well, I digress. I grew interested in these hacked games that are apparently in any thrift store, on eBay, or handed out by homeless people to random passersby. I didn't have the pleasure of meeting these creepy people. I merely found this particular cartridge in a trash bin when the garbage truck backed into my neighbor's dumpster. I noticed the game and asked the trash man if I could take it, and he didn't seem to mind. It was thrown away after all. I of course checked with my neighbor to confirm if they actually didn't want it, though they seemed perplexed as if they'd never seen it in their life. Their son made a grab for it, a little boy who saw the Charizard on the cover, crying out, "Mommy, I want Pokemon!" But his mother told him no, seeing as I found it. He didn't even have a Game Boy anyway, he just liked Pokemon. Thinking nothing more, I simply went home, looking at the cartridge's sticker on the way. Just a plain old red version, the sticker torn slightly across the Charizard's neck, but that was expected with such an old game. I had blue version as a kid, so I was a bit eager to see the albeit minimal differences red version had. I was rather disappointed by what I saw when the title screen showed up. Pokemon Strangled Red version. Well, damn it, it was a hack. Hacks were neat and all, but they had zero monetary value. The original is quite valuable by now, and I wanted to play Red anyway, not this crap. Oh well, it was free, might as well try it. The name was odd, however. Strangled Red? That made no sense. Not even in a morbid description of someone being asphyxiated, as people turn blue when choking, not red.
Who knows, maybe there was a pair of these hacks and I just got the red one. The more I thought about this though, the more interested I became. My initial disappointment turned into curiosity. I wanted to know what the creator had made, and I was going to note everything I saw. The first oddity I noticed was the start screen had a Charizard next to the trainer instead of a Charmander. Also, the Pokemon never cycled through like the original versions did. It just stayed Charizard, even after 5 minutes of waiting. Shrugging, I hit start, noticing there was no Charizard cry as I did, like there was supposed to be. I saw there was a continue option, so I figured I'd do what everyone did with used games and see what the previous owner had done. No. I blinked in surprise. No? What do you mean no? The game wouldn't let me continue no matter what. Though on the 4th attempt, I heard the Charizard cry. Quiet and barely audible, but there. Shrugging it off, I decided to just hit new game like I would have done after checking the old file anyway. The screen cut to black for a while. No Professor Oak. No starting theme. Just nothing at all. Eventually, the screen came back, showing a bedroom, 2 beds, 2 TVs, and a computer in the corner. My trainer sprite was the usual one, consistent with the original red version. I was curious as to why it didn't ask my name, though that was answered as I opened the pause menu, noticing my trainer was named Steven. No, this isn't my real name or some stupid crap like that. This game isn't self-aware or haunted. At least, not that I know of. It just had a name chosen already. Curious, I saw he had the starter amount of money and no badges. He didn't look exactly like Red though, as his hair was longer, almost reaching halfway down his back. Red's usual smile replaced with a confident smirk. Honestly, I found the sprite much cooler than Red. Next, I checked out his Pokemon. A single Charmander, level 5, named Miki. Nothing was odd about it. Or should I say her, with the name and all. She had beginning Charmander stats, only knew Scratch and Tail Whip, basic stuff. The game seemed relatively normal. Returning to the game, I walked about the room, noticing Steven's long hair was present on the back of my trainer sprite when my back was turned to the camera. I didn't recognize the house, but I descended the stairs to see more. Downstairs was another trainer, who spoke to me the instant I came down. Mike. Ready yet? Steven. Yeah. I assumed this Mike was my rival, pre-decided for me. A replacement of Blue, most likely. I thought back to the bedroom having 2 beds, realizing they weren't just rivals, they were brothers. They talked back and forth, basic Pokemon dialogue. Become a Pokemaster, catch 'em all, stuff like that, before having a little argument over which is better, Charmander or Squirtle. Which of course led to the introduction battle, like the one versus Blue in the lab. Simple enough, scratch, tackle, until I won purely for having the first turn. I took note of how much better Steven's sprite looked in combat than Red's. A different pose, his hair looking like it was blowing in the wind. A brief, minor upgrade, but still much nicer. I left the house after some more banter with my brother, stepping out to the Pallet Town theme. Going to the east, I found this was indeed Pallet Town. The house was simply on the outskirts to the west. I noted there was no mysterious grassy field like in normal Pallet Town. Wandering about, I decided to check in on Red's home. His mother was inside, and when I talked to her, she commented on how handsome Steven looked, hoping her son would look up to him as a role model for when he became a trainer himself next year. Which of course led me to realize this game took place a year before the original Pokemon. Red was even upstairs, playing on the SNES in his room, commenting,
I'm gonna be the best too when it's my turn.
I was starting to like this hack. It was interesting, a completely new adventure, a different character. Hell, Steven even seemed to have a history with the people in his town, a reputation, a personality beyond a silent protagonist. The people in town talked to him as a person, making conversation, not just spouting tutorial crap. Even Blue's sister had new dialogue. She and Steven seemed to be in a relationship too, as the dialogue ended with a kiss and a heart over her head. Professor Oak simply wished me well, giving me a Pokédex to aid my adventure. He wasn't giving it to me to be the reason behind the adventure like in every other Pokemon game out there. He gave it to me out of kindness, something to help me on my way. A gift. I was liking this more and more with each second. The game seemed to have an actual story now. I was somebody, not just a cookie-cutter protagonist anyone could be. Not some blank sheet that could be replaced without notice. The story was different, though the actual gameplay remained unchanged. I went north like I was supposed to. Went from town to town, collected badges, received the praise of the leaders. Steven's fame even seemed to spread, as some NPCs would talk like they knew him. I used Miki for every battle, and she was growing surprisingly fast. She handled Brock with ease, even pounding Misty with no trouble at all. She wasn't as adversely affected by super effective attacks as others, did more damage than a regular Charmander. She was a veritable powerhouse. She even became a Charizard at the mere level of 25. Not bad at all, I must say. Things started to get weird though, as soon as I reached Lavender Town. I know. Lavender Town is the focus behind every creepy story, but it was the only place that was noticeably different. There was no Team Rocket invasion, which I found odd, though I did remember this was a year in the past, so the invasion wouldn't occur until Red's time. I tried to enter Pokemon Tower, aiming to get a Ghastly, but that's when it got odd. Steven, I have no reason to be here. Steven wouldn't go into Pokemon Tower no matter what I did. This was weird. I mean, hell, there are a million places in Kanto you really have no need to be. Little random houses with nothing but children NPCs, for example. Why was it here that Steven wouldn't enter? With a shrug, I figured I wouldn't need a Ghastly, seeing as Miki could handle anything. So I simply went on my way, Lavender Town serving no purpose other than a passageway with a Poke Center. The game progressed normally from there. The remaining gyms fell and eventually I made my way to the Elite Four and defeated them. As with Blue, my brother Mike was there before me, initiating the championship battle, which Miki swept with ease. The aftermath of the battle was quite pleasant. None of the tension that was present between Red and Blue at the end of their match. The brothers congratulated each other on their progress and shook hands, before the screen went white. No Hall of Fame, nor any credits. When the screen came back, it was at the house again, the two brothers sitting at the computer, conversing with each other. Steven, I don't want to. Mike, come on, I just gotta borrow her for a second to finish the Pokédex. The entry won't register unless she recognizes me as master for just a second. Steven, but she's my Miki. Mike, I promise I'll give her back. Come on, please. Yes, no. I was a bit perplexed, so I hit no to be cautious. Mike, come on, please. No. Mike, come on, please. I realized this would simply continue to loop until I hit yes, so I did, just to see what would happen. Mike, alright, this will just take a sec. Then we'll both be Pokemasters. Steven, ... The screen changed to the animation shown when two people trade Pokemon, which I found a bit weird, seeing as I was solo, but whatever. This was what was apparently supposed to happen. Miki went first. I watched lazily as she began to travel down the trading tube. Snap! That made me jump, the sudden noise resonating in my silent bedroom, loud due to the volume being way up. Looking at the screen, I noticed the game had seemed to freeze. Miki still in mid-trade, but the game wasn't doing anything. With a sigh, I just turned off the game, wondering when my last save was. When the game turned back on, I stared for a moment at the start screen. There was no Charizard next to the trainer. Upon pressing start, I saw the new game option was absent, leaving only continue. This was strange, to say the least. So I selected it. The game starting without even showing my stats as usual. My jaw dropped at what I was greeted with. 1 year later. The Lavender Town theme came first, playing its normal way, the screen slowly fading in from blackness. Steven was in the Pokemon Tower, which made the music even stranger. seeing as the tower had its own theme. He was standing in front of a tombstone, not doing anything. Wondering what was going on, I pressed A. Steven, ... Confused, I tried walking, realizing I was indeed in control at the moment. I brought up the pause menu and checked my party. Miki was gone. Not just Miki, all Pokemon. He had nothing. The Pokédex was absent from the menu. His bag was empty. Honestly concerned now, I checked his trainer card. He had no money. He had no badges. His playtime was 8,795 hours, which was impossible as I had only 30 logged in before. But that wasn't the strangest part. His picture. The picture of the handsome, confident young trainer was different. His eyes were blank, his face turned slightly down. That smirk of his was gone, replaced by a lack of any expression at all. That long hair of his, before in a perfect perm, was now messy and unkempt. I couldn't look at him anymore. Closing the menu, I went to move out of the tower, but with every step I took away from the tombstone, the screen flickered, like it did when a Pokemon was poisoned. Gulping, I brought up the trainer card again. His picture was getting worse. Every step I took, he hung his head more and more. His shoulders slumped. He bent over. By the time I had exited the tower, he was on his knees, hands to his face, hair draped across him. I had guessed already what was going on, but this clinched it. I began to put some things together in my mind. I had always wondered why there was no champion in the original games besides your rival. Why is it you, the protagonist, had to beat your rival, when he just waltzed in, no previous champion to challenge? Then, it struck me. The answer was right here. The previous champion gave up. His precious Miki was apparently dead, and with her, so died part of him. His Pokédex, the other Pokemon, his badges, his fame, all of it, he threw it away. In that year, the year that I missed, the year where all those hours came from. I even did the math. There's 8,765 hours in a year. Add that to my 30 from before and it matched up. Even so, the game kept going. This should have been an ending, I thought. I mean, what else was there to do? I had no Pokédex, no Pokemon, not anything. What was I supposed to be doing? I talked to everyone in the town, but they all said similar things.
Are you okay?
Still mourning, I see.
Everything will be alright.
Please, is there anything we can do? Steven never replied to them, and they all simply said the same things over and over. I couldn't put the game down now. This was all so strange. Curious, I headed off into the tall grass, and eventually got into battle with Rattata. No Pokemon was sent out, just Steven's sprite. I was wondering how I'd battle. Wild Rattata left you be. The battle ended without anything happening. This was certainly interesting, and it happened with every Pokemon I encountered. Wild Pidgey ignored you. Wild Ponyta wandered off. The music never changed either. No matter where I went, Lavender Town came from the speakers, following me, sometimes slowing down slightly, sometimes not. I searched everywhere, every town, talked to everybody, wondering just what the hell I needed to do. My frustration was mixing with the depressing atmosphere of all this, making the experience altogether unnerving and uncomfortable. But I couldn't tear myself away. I was starting to get a bit angry though. Nobody telling me anything besides giving me their condolences and trying to give me items like lemonade or coffee. Each met with, "Steven, no." I slapped myself for idiocy, suddenly realizing how the likely answer was right in front of me. Pallet Town, of course. When I went there though, which took a long time having to walk, no Pokemon to fly with, no bicycle to ride, and Steven only seemed to move half the regular movement speed. It wasn't much different. I first tried talking to Professor Oak. "These things happen. You were just unlucky." Next, I tried Blue's sister.
Please, don't leave home again.
Red's mom wouldn't even talk to me at all. With nowhere else in mind to go, I walked to the west, finding the house from the beginning, which I had never entered since leaving Pallet Town. Inside was Mike, but talking to him was just as useless. Mike, I'm so sorry. I pondered for a moment if this was really the ending. Stephen doomed to do nothing but roam Kanto in misery, haunted by the memories, forced to listen to everyone's concerns about him. As a last-ditch effort to do anything, I went to the bedroom and walked over to the bed. Stephen, I'm going to sleep. The screen faded to black for a moment, but then slowly faded back in, the world having a black tint to it. Mike's sprite laying on the other bed. I assumed this meant it was night. Stephen, I'm going to do it. Do what? Again, I had no idea. Tried inspecting everything in the room. Nothing happened. As soon as I left the house, another dialogue. Stephen, it can bring her back. It can do anything. What in the hell was it? Something that could do anything? I couldn't for the life of me figure it out. Wandering about, I tried to leave Pallet Town the usual way. Stephen, not that way. He wouldn't go any further. I tried the homes. Stephen, through them. I quirked my eyebrow at that, forgetting for a moment this was not a real Pokemon game. The vulgarity just took me off guard. I continued to look around, but there was nowhere I could go, until I accidentally stepped on the ocean, and Stephen walked right in, only the upper half of his sprite visible, like the swimmers you encounter in the Cerulean Gym. I didn't know he could